Everybody's like, you taught that from school, everywhere. Big business. If you want to be successful, you want to be like Trump, gimme, push, step, crush.
I'm not so sure he's a disaster in the general election. Especially if there's a terrorist attack within 2 months of the election. Then it's definitely going to be...
You want to stop Trump?
If we set this up the way we're setting it up, if there's an act of terrorism in late October, early November, it's going to redound to Donald Trump's favor in ways that are highly unpredictable. I saw that play in Israel. It elected Bibi Netanyahu over Shimon Peres after the Rabin assassination.
So you think we're a terrorist attack away from President Trump?
Could be, Chuck.
Trump needs terrorism like he needs air to breathe. From here on in, and it's been so for a month or more, Trump needs terror incidents. They are the grist for his mill of propaganda and demagogy. He needs to be able to point to a constant stream of incidents saying, this is the fruit of the reset by Hillary and the Arab Spring by Hillary.
Welcome back, everyone. We continue our breaking news coverage of the disappearance of MS-804. Egypt Air says the Airbus 320 was heading from Paris to Cairo with 66 people on board when it disappeared from radar.
The plane was at an altitude of 37,000 feet, 10 miles inside Egyptian airspace. An Egypt Air official says there is no confirmation of a distress call and no notification of any special cargo or dangerous goods on board.
This A320 had all the regular maintenance, that everything was on schedule. This pilot, they're telling us, is someone with great experience, with thousands of hours of flight experience and over 2,000 hours on this specific aircraft. This plane disappearing 5 hours ago now at this time.
What just happened about 12 hours ago? A plane got blown out of the sky. If anybody thinks it wasn't blown out of the sky, you're 100% wrong, folks, okay?
Immediately after the November 13th attacks, hours before the claim of responsibility came, they were all over social media applauding this incident. And here, there's a silence not only from the official wing of ISIS, but also their sympathizers are remarkably quiet. Honestly, we don't know what to make of it. I mean, one theory is that ISIS is not involved.
Maybe
another
perhaps
plane was
that
blown
first
up,
tweet.
and I can practically guarantee who blew it up. And
But listen,
another plane
listen,
went down.
Donald,
and
listen to
let me
yourself
tell you,
right
the
now.
mindset of a weak Hillary Clinton, which is 4 more years of Obama, is not going to do it for our country, Mika. This world is changing. And another couple of planes go down, Mika, and you're going to have a depression worldwide, the likes of which you've never seen. Because nobody's going to travel. There will be no anything. There will be no communication between countries. And you will have a problem the likes of which you've never seen. And I will tell you, 4 more years of a weak Hillary Clinton, and that's what she is, 4 more years of that, it will not work. It will not work. And all I did is point it out. And, and when you find out what happened to the plane, it will be exactly what I said. That plane didn't go down because of mechanical failure.
If a couple of more planes go down, there will be no more air travel, no more commerce. And out of that, Trump derives no to 4 more years of the weak Hillary Clinton. Now look at that. That's an attack from the right, dear friends. Trump is a bigger warmonger than Hillary. Trump is going to rely on terrorism in order to get to the White House. George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, the terrorists were their best friends. Right? Every time there was a major terror attack, that was Christmas for the Bush-Cheney administration. And now we're back to it. Any terrorism that occurs from here on in must be attributed to intelligence community factions that are pro-Trump. And they're trying to stampede the American people into believing that Trump is necessary as their savior. Get the picture?
And Harry Truman, with what he did in dropping and having the guts to drop the bomb in 1944, saved billions of American lives. And that's what Harry Truman did, and he became one of the 3 great presidents of the United States. And here's a man who would do the same thing, because he's going to become one of the 4 great presidents of the United States.
Morally unfit. And I don't want one of those stubby fingers reaching out to touch the nuclear button.
Donald will betray his supporters on every issue.
The Tax Wall Street Party demands a 15% protective tariff.
Well, he wants a higher protective tariff.
He wants to use
that as a threat, but not really have it.
In business negotiations. say there's Nabisco and Kraft. And there's
Yeah, but I think you're arguing semantics. I don't think you're giving him credit for what the thing that the Republicans are criticizing him for is protectionism, and he's with you on that issue.
To create his own monopolies. You're being conned.
Webster says that we can't trust Donald Trump because he wants to raise tariffs perhaps as much as 45% when he would go 15%.
And I'm a free trader. I believe it.
Last week, the New York Times editorial board quoted you as saying that you would impose up to a 45% tariff on Chinese goods.
And that's wrong. They were wrong. It's the New York Times. They're always wrong. What I said to the New York Times is that we have great power, economic power over China. And if we wanted to use that, and the amount, and where the 45% comes in, that would be the amount based on their devaluations that we should get. What I'm saying is this. I'm not saying we do it.
You said the other day that you would impose a 45% tariff on all Chinese goods coming into this country. Wouldn't that both increase the price of these goods to American consumers and weaken the Chinese economy even more?
Chris, I didn't say I was going to do it.
You know, I'm a free trader. I believe in free trade, which is nice and conservative, but I believe in free trade.
What would happen to Wisconsin? Because many of our jobs here are involved in import-export. What would happen to the price of goods if, in fact, a President Donald Trump were to impose a 45% tariff on goods coming in from China?
But it'll never happen. Wisconsin would end up doing much, much better than it's doing right now. That would never happen. But you have to have the threat out there, because what they're doing is currency manipulation. They're devaluing their currencies, and they're making it virtually impossible for
you're a much better negotiator than I am, but you just said it will never happen. So you've basically given away that your negotiating ploy is a bluff. Didn't you just say you're bluffing?
You've got to have a threat out there. You've got to have something to negotiate with.
They are the single greatest currency manipulator that's ever been on this planet. And if they don't stop devaluing, we're going to have to charge them a tax on the goods coming in. They, by the way, Bill, just in case you don't know it, they tax our goods going into China.
They say that you are a protectionist. You said yesterday in your speech that you are a free trader. They point out that you've advocated a 25% tariff on Chinese imports.
Sure.
How can you claim to be a free trader and be for a 25% tariff on Chinese imports?
I do believe in free trade, but only if you have smart leaders. And with China, it's not free trade. We don't have free trade with China. I love free trade, but it's got to be free trade and it's got to be fair trade. It's got to be where everything's equal. It's not equal. We're losing our jobs. We're losing everything. We're losing our manufacturing, our base. We're losing everything. Now, we can change it.
Would you be
last year,
a protectionist?
No, I'm not a protectionist. I'm a free trader. But we have to have better deals.
I think it's important to institute a reasonable protective tariff. I think a permanent, structural, not a weapon, not a bargaining chip, but a 15% protective tariff. With Trump, it's going to be 35% or nothing, depending on whether they say something nice about him. So much about Trump is deception. He lies.
Let's talk about China briefly. China is one of your bugbears. The China-US relationship is perhaps the most important, if somewhat vexed, bilateral relationship between two countries in the world. So when you said in 2010 that you welcomed a trade war with China, was that a joke as well?
No, that's not a joke. No. And welcome.
That's a tragedy.
Welcome is a very strong. No, I don't think it's a tragedy. China has been eating our lunch. China has taken the United States for a ride like nobody other than perhaps OPEC has done.
But Donald, they're not just eating your lunch, they're paying for your lunch.
No,
they are your banker, and you don't pick a fight with your banker.
You don't understand economics. China is taking advantage of this country like nobody has ever taken advantage of the United States. And you look at what's going on in this country, we are not making our product now. China and other countries are making our product.
But, I mean, we live off Chinese manufacturing, whether we like it or not.
That's because when you say we, you are stupid. You're stupid.
You called me a bad economist. I'm stupid.
Well, you're
what
not
else
a good,
are you going to do? Come on. I've been very civil to you,
You're not
Donald.
a good economist. No, you haven't. You're not a good economist at all. You don't understand business, and you don't understand what I'm saying with China. You think it's a joke.
So I'm fired,
it's not
right?
a joke.
So I'm fired.
You're not fired.
Okay.
You're not fired.
What keeps you up at night?
I sleep well. I mean, I sleep really well. I have nothing against China. I just hate that their leaders are so much smarter than our leaders. 2016, we will not be the world leader anymore. We have been always.
But in
2016, China becomes the great economic leader.
Even if Mitt Romney is elected, he says that
maybe you can turn it around.
Well, do you think he could turn it around?
I think we can.
Do you think Mitt Romney can turn it around?
I think he can.
As a line of clothing. Now, where were these made?
These were made, I don't know where they were made, but they were made someplace. But they're great. It's ties, shirts,
cufflinks, everything sold at Macy's, and they're doing great. #1 selling tie anywhere in the world.
#1 selling tie anywhere in the world. You wouldn't wear that shirt?
We also have them in white and beautiful white.
Where are the shirts made? Bangladesh.
Well, it's good. Okay. We employ people in Bangladesh.
Ties? Where are the ties
they
made?
Have to work
These are
too.
beautiful ties.
They are great ties.
The ties are made in where? China? Ties are made in China.
Well, I'll tell you, and you know what, David, in all fairness, I've been very open about that, and not all of them, by the way, but I've been very open about that. Are you okay?
No, I'm fine. I know.
The chair was made in China.
The chair was made in China.
You buy that at Macy's, by the way.
Let's just shut down the Donald Trump factory in Beijing.
I would love to.
And we'll put up a tie factory in Jamaica, Queens.
I love it.
And we'll make the Donald Trump tie there.
I'm for it.
It seems Ivanka Trump's scarves are too hot for their own good. See, the brand, named for Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump's eldest daughter, is the subject of a recall. About 20,000 of the rayon scarves, which are made in China, are being pulled off of shelves because they pose a burn risk. The Consumer Product Safety Commission says there have been no reported injuries. A spokesperson for Ivanka Trump says the company is making sure that issue is fixed immediately.
Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter, has been hit with a recall order by the Consumer Products Safety Commission, which is that Ivanka's Chinese-made scarves turn out to be flammable. In other words, you buy yourself a high-priced, overpriced Ivanka Trump designer scarf made in China, first of all, made in China, coming from the great friend of the American worker, who, whenever he can in practice, negates that. But if you get one of those scarves on and you're lighting up something, gosh, it might start burning. So they've recalled them. Consumer Product Safety Commission. Consumer Product Safety Commission, which would not exist if the Donald had his way. Everything would be radically deregulated, as we know.
Candidates, as we gather tonight in this very august theater, just outside and across the country, picketers are gathering as well. They're demanding an immediate hike in the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Just a few hours ago, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo proposed doing the same for all state workers, the first governor to do so. Mr. Trump, as the leading presidential candidate on this stage and one whose tax plan exempts couples making up to $50,000 a year from paying any federal income taxes at all, are you sympathetic to the protesters' cause, since a $15 wage works out to about $31,000 a year?
I can't be, Neil. And the reason I can't be is that we are a country that is being beaten on every front, economically, militarily. There is nothing that we do now to win. We don't win anymore. Our taxes are too high. I've come up with a tax plan that many, many people like very much. It's going to be a tremendous plan. I think it'll make our country and our economy very dynamic. But taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is. People have to go out, they have to work really hard, and they have to get into that upper stratum. But we cannot do this if we are going to compete with the rest of the world. We just can't do it.
So do not raise the minimum wage.
I would not raise the minimum.
When it comes to the infrastructure that we have that's falling apart, there is so much that needs to be done here. And last night I heard you say that you would keep the minimum wage as is, that you would not raise it. Explain how that is necessarily good for the economy.
Very tough thing.
Because $7.50 an hour, Donald, nobody can live on that. And there are people living on that.
Mika, we're becoming a non-competitive country. That's the problem. We're becoming non-competitive. I would love to say make it $50 an hour. I think it's great.
I understand.
And you know what?
You
it's a tough position politically. I mean, the best thing for me to say, I'm running for all of a sudden for the last 4 months. The first time in my life, I'm a politician. I can't believe this. I'm a politician. I never respected politicians. Now I'm a
But Donald, do you have people working for you making $7.50 an hour?
Here's the thing. Yeah, probably. Maybe I do.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe somewhere along the line I got thousands of people. But you know what? We have to become competitive with the world. Our taxes are too high. Our wages are too high. Everything's too high. We have to compete with other countries. And if we're going to just say, hey, I just see in New York where they made it $15, well, you're going to see
our
a lot
wages
of bad
are
things.
not. I mean, you can argue our wages are
this.
flat.
What's going to happen is now people are going to start firing people because because they're going to, you know, the old story, and it's happened 100 times, it's always happening. But I'm not even saying from that standpoint, Mika, we have got to do something to compete with the rest of the world. Our country is not competitive anymore.
What somebody like Donald Trump is doing is playing on the fears and anxieties of the American people. And people are afraid. They're afraid of terrorism, rightfully so. They're anxious about an economy in which the middle class is disappearing. We're seeing massive levels of income and wealth inequality. People are worried about the future for their kids. These are legitimate fears. So instead of having a rational discussion about how we rebuild the middle class, how we deal with Wall Street, how we have a tax system in which the wealthy and powerful start paying their fair share of taxes, what Trump is saying is it's all the Muslims' fault. It's all the Mexicans' fault.
How do you explain why that's doing so well right now?
Because it's an easy solution. How do we rebuild the middle class? Well, you're going to have to stand up to corporate America. You're going to have to stand up to Wall Street. You're going to have to create millions of decent paying jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure. You're going to have to provide health care to all people, et cetera, et cetera. But what Trump says, and this is new, this is what demagogues all over the world historically have done. They say, are you nervous? Are you scared? Are you frightened for the future? I'll tell you the reason. It's the Muslims. All those Muslims out there are terrorists. We have to stop them coming into this country. It's the Mexicans. It's the immigrants who are coming in. They're all rapists and criminals. Oh, okay. Now I'm angry. We're going to take it out on them. Meanwhile, this same Trump says the minimum wage in America, which is $7.25 an hour, he says it's good that we have a low minimum wage. This guy Trump is saying we need to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 0.3%, the very richest people in this country.
How do you defeat that?
You defeat it by going out to the working people in this country and making it clear that if we are going to create an economy that works for our kids, that works for working families, we have got to do it together. We have to understand the real causes, and the real causes are the greed of corporate America, the greed of Wall Street, not some poor Mexican who is in this country trying to live on $7 an hour.
Let's talk about some important domestic policy issues. American workers, you say they deserve to earn more money, right?
Yeah. I want them to earn more money.
So Bernie Sanders says he wants $15 an hour minimum wage. And he has really gone after you lately for saying you're happy with $7.25, the current federal minimum wage. You can't live on $7.25 an hour.
And I'm actually looking at that because I'm very different from most Republicans. I mean, you have to have something that you can live on. But what I'm really looking to do is get people great jobs so they make much more money than that, so they make more money than the $15. Now, if you start playing around too much with the lower level number, you're not going to be competitive.
Hillary Clinton says she's ready to go to $12. Bernie Sanders says 15.
She's doing that
give
because
me a number. If you were president, what would you recommend?
No, I'm looking at it, but I
but
don't
you're
like.
Open to raising the minimum wage.
I'm open to doing something with it because I don't like that. But what I really do like is bring our jobs back so they're making much more than the $15.
Because if you want some of those Bernie Sanders supporters out there, and I know you want them,
I'll get them
in a general election, let's say against Hillary, you're going to have to do something about issues like that.
Well, I told you how I feel.
A $15 minimum wage ought to be obvious. Yeah, Trump, the great demagogue Trump, right? The great schizophrenic, right? His personality of the primaries said wages are too high and I don't like the minimum wage. Now he tells CNN, we're looking at it. Well, I wouldn't believe the first and I wouldn't believe the second. I think the one thing I believe is he's a compulsive liar.
Donald Trump is a pathological liar.
I'm going to tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. And in a pattern that I think is straight out of a psychology textbook. His response is to accuse everybody else of lying. He accuses everybody on that debate stage of lying, and it's simply a mindless yell. Whatever he does, he accuses everyone else of doing. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen. Donald Trump is such a narcissist that Barack Obama looks at him and goes, dude, what's your problem? Everything in Donald's world is about Donald. And he combines being a pathological liar. And I say pathological because I actually think Donald, if you hooked him up to a lie detector test, he could say one thing in the morning, one thing at noon, and one thing in the evening, all contradictory, and he'd pass the lie detector test each time. Whatever lie he's telling at that minute, he believes it.
After months of toying with the idea of running for president on the Reform Party ticket, the billionaire real estate developer has finally made a decision. I sat down with Donald Trump and asked him what he's going to do.
I've made my decision. I'm not going to be running. The party is, as you know, self-destructing.
When you say the party is self-destructing, what do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined.
a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
I want to ask you about the Anti-Defamation League, which this week called on you to publicly condemn unequivocally the racism of former KKK Grand Wizard David Duke, who recently said that voting against you at this point would be treason to your heritage. Will you unequivocally condemn David Duke and say that you don't want his vote or that of other white supremacists in this election?
Well, just so you understand, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know, did he endorse me or what's going on? Because, you know, I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists. And so you're asking me a question that I'm supposed to be talking about people that I know nothing about.
But I guess the question from the Anti-Defamation League is, even if you don't know about their endorsement, there are these groups and individuals endorsing you. Would you just say unequivocally you condemn them and you don't want their support?
Well, I have to look at the group. I mean, I don't know what group you're talking about. You wouldn't want me to condemn a group that I know nothing about. I'd have to look. If you would send me a list of the groups, I will do research on them, and certainly I would disavow if I thought there was something wrong. But you may have groups in there that are totally fine, and it would be very unfair. So give me a list of the groups, and I'll let you know.
Okay. I mean, I'm just talking about David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan here, but...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know David Duke. I don't believe I've ever met him. I'm pretty sure I didn't meet him, and I just don't know anything about him.
Many Americans feared Irish and German immigrants would outbreed, outvote, and outwork native-born Americans. Anti-immigrant groups quickly formed and began to call themselves nativists. Nativists saw the multiplying numbers of Irish and German Catholics as a conspiracy by the Pope to take over the Republic. In America's biggest cities, nativist groups attacked and burned Catholic churches, schools, even orphanages. As these small anti-immigrant groups grew in number, they formed a new political party called the Know Nothing Party.
Well, the Know Nothings is kind of a nickname that applied to the American Party, and they get the name from the secrecy that surrounded the organization. The rule was if you were asked about the organization, people said, "What is this group you belong to?" You were ordered to answer, "I know nothing."
You know, I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists. And so you're asking me a question that I'm supposed to be talking about people that I know nothing about. You wouldn't want me to condemn a group that I know nothing about. I'd have to look. If you would send me a list of the groups, I will do research on them, and certainly I would disavow if I thought there was something wrong. But you may have groups in there that are totally fine, and it would be very unfair. So give me a list of the groups, and I'll let you know.
Okay. I mean, I'm just talking about David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan here, but...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know David Duke. I don't believe I've ever met him. I'm pretty sure I didn't meet him, and I just don't know anything about him.
What Trump built in Atlantic City was a Potemkin village, a facade that looks fabulous in the front, but behind which there is no substance. All there was Donald Trump's smile and a whole lot of unaffordable debt, and that combination didn't make it. Atlantic City had suffered basically since the 1950s from a declining tourist and vacation market. So something was necessary as far as the state was concerned in order to assure Atlantic City's success. The people of New Jersey voted in 1976 to amend the Constitution, and the first casino opened in 1978.
This casino is now open. It's not too long after that Donald's interest develops. He starts flirting with Atlantic City, and he builds the plaza down there. He acquires the castle. He then went into an acquisition phase, which is really what the Taj is.
The Taj was unlike any other property in Atlantic City. The casino floor was about twice the size of the typical casino floor in Atlantic City, and it was just unheard of to have a property on that scale. Huge amounts of money were invested in the building of the Taj, hundreds of millions of dollars, but Trump felt that he could complete the property.
He promised the Casino Control Commission. He's got all kinds of lines to the banks. Major banks, one major bank, they'd love to dump money in my lap. You know, he led them to believe this transaction was uniquely something he could finance. Obviously, that's not exactly the way it turned out. He winds up relying totally on junk bonds.
A junk bond is so lowly rated that there's a high probability that you're not going to get your money back. There were 675 million issued, and a lot of the bonds were owned by small individuals. So little guys who weren't wealthy actually had a stake in that property.
No matter where you were building, it was very hard to get money out of traditional sources. So, junk bonds were the way you did it, just kind of like what he says about bankruptcy.
You used the laws of the country, the laws of the land, and I did.
It's the law of the land, I just took advantage of it. I think it's kind of the same thing there.
You had all of those people who were the giants in the gaming industry coming to Atlantic City. Now, in addition to that, you've got the #1 real estate developer in New York. What could be bad? How could this possibly go wrong?
Now, this report was written in the summer of 1989. I was very disturbed by the amount of debt that was being piled on these properties. The debt service was over $95 million a year. Those kind of numbers made it necessary for that casino to generate a win of over $1 million a day. And no casino in the world has ever done that at that time.
Donald Trump's name is still at the top of Atlantic City's Trump Taj Mahal, but it's been a long time since the businessman owned any casinos here. He opened his first Atlantic City venture in 1984, but when the Taj opened 8 years later, it proved a step too far, declaring bankruptcy just a year after it opened. In political debates, the Republican frontrunner now says he saw the downturn here coming, a claim which irritates many who live here.
If he's such a savior, now he wants to say, I saw Atlantic City, I knew it was going down, I got out. Well, why didn't you stay? What are you going to do when the United States is in trouble?
Eventually, all 3 of Trump's casinos here went bust. The most recent closure was the Trump Plaza, which now sits empty on the Atlantic City boardwalk. The top casino regulator in Atlantic City at the time the Taj Mahal went under was Steve Presky.
This was the start. There's the Taj Mahal in the background.
He says it wasn't just big banks that lost out in the bankruptcy.
It wiped out all of the obligations that the Trump people, all 3 properties, owed to hundreds of other people, small businesses, suppliers, all of the people I've mentioned to you, many of which went out of business.
Persky says that Trump must have known the Taj Mahal would never work when he had to rely on high-interest loans known as junk bonds.
He was dismissive of the other companies that were relying on junk bonds to finance their operations. I would never do that. You got to be crazy to do that. Well, 2 years later, he did exactly that, and it didn't work.
Trump's casinos aren't the only ones to have gone bust here in recent decades, and Atlantic City has had to deal with everything from neighbouring states legalising gambling to the Great Recession to Hurricane Sandy. But local residents hope voters will remember the failed gamble of Trump's Atlantic City empire when they head to the polls.
Gambling is taking everything. Gambling promises everything. Low taxes, low this, it's not there. Everything is going down and down. Money, money, money. They don't care what the city looks like, what's going to happen to the city. That's it. It's not their business. Taj Mahal is going to open up tomorrow. He spent $1 billion to build a place. It's like a fairyland up there. Gorgeous. Another empty lot. Well, we'll go over here to Texas Avenue. On the boardwalk. Oh, we had rolling chairs on the boardwalk lined up for 15 squares all along. People used to dress in gowns, gorgeous clothes. You don't see it anymore, Christine. You see panhandlers, people sleeping on the boardwalk, filthy. Boy, that Taj Mahal stays out like a sore thumb. Trump is down at $1 billion, and he borrowed $750 million from the bank, and he asked me for $100 million, which I didn't have at that time. What are you laughing about? I told Donald as soon as I get the money, I'll give him some of it. He says, don't forget, everything is down. I show you the Traymore down, the President Hotel is down, the Charles was over here. Hey, look at this. Look at what is it? The fairyland. What do we have? Nothing.
The Taj Mahal, at the time that it opened, was probably the largest casino in the world, and it was certainly magnificent. And for a short period of time, that new enthusiasm, the new excitement, the magic of it all was terrific.
It had a sense of such excess and opulence. This was, in every way, an attempt to convey empty wealth. It turned out to be a lot emptier than Donald expected or that any of us saw coming.
By the end of 1990, which was less than a year after it opened, it was failing to generate the revenues that were necessary to fund the bonds that had built it. They just couldn't pay the debt. And as a result, that led to further bankruptcy proceedings and eventually to Trump's loss of the facility.
Mr. Trump, you talk a lot about how you are the person on this stage to grow the economy. I want to ask you about your business record. Trump corporations, casinos and hotels, have declared bankruptcy 4 times over the last quarter century. In 2011, you told Forbes magazine this: "I've used the laws of the country to my advantage." But at the same time, financial experts involved in those bankruptcies say that lenders to your companies lost billions of dollars. Question, sir, with that record, why should we trust you to run the nation's business?
Because I have used the laws of this country, just like the greatest people that you read about every day in business have used the laws of this country, the chapter laws, to do a great job for my company, for myself, for my employees, for my family, etc. I have never gone bankrupt, by the way. I have never. But out of hundreds of deals,
but sir,
excuse me,
that's your line, but your companies have gone bankrupt.
Out of, what am I saying? Out of hundreds of deals that I've done, hundreds, on 4 occasions, I've taken advantage of the laws of this country, like other people. I'm not going to name their names because I'm not going to embarrass, but virtually every person that you read about on the front page of the business sections, they've used the law. The difference is when somebody else uses those laws, nobody writes about it. When I use it, they say, oh, Trump, Trump, Trump. The fact is, I built a net worth of more than $10 billion. I have a great, great company. I employ thousands of people, and I'm very proud of the job I did. Again, Chris, hundreds and hundreds of deals. 4 times I've taken advantage of the laws, and frankly, so has everybody else in my position.
Well, sir, let's just talk about the latest example, which is Trump Entertainment Resorts, which went bankrupt in 2009. In that case alone, lenders to your company lost over $1 billion, and more than 1,100 people were laid off.
Well,
is that the way that you run the country?
Let me tell you about the lenders. First of all, these lenders aren't babies. These are total killers. These are not the nice, sweet little people that you think, okay? You know, I mean, you're living in a world of the make-believe, Chris. You want to know the truth. And I had the good sense to leave Atlantic City, which, by the way, Caesars just went bankrupt. Every company, Chris can tell you, every company virtually in Atlantic City went bankrupt. Every company. And let me just tell you, I had the good sense, and I've gotten a lot of credit in the financial pages. 7 years ago, I left Atlantic City before it totally cratered, and I made a lot of money in Atlantic City, and I'm very proud of it. I want to tell you that. Very, very proud of it.
What Donald Trump did was use eminent domain to try to take the property of an elderly woman on the Strip in Atlantic City. That is not public purpose. That is downright wrong. And here's the problem with that.
All right, okay.
The problem was it was to tear down. It was to
Jeb
tear
wants
down.
to be. He wants to be a tough guy. He wants to be a tough guy tonight.
It was to tear down
I didn't
the
take
house,
the property.
and the net result was you tried.
I didn't
and
take
you
the
lost
property.
in the court.
The woman ultimately didn't want to do that. I walked
That is not
away,
true.
And
the
it was
simple
great that
fact
I
is,
didn't.
to turn this into a limousine parking lot for his casinos is not a public use. And in Florida, based on what we did, we made that impossible. It is part of our Constitution. That's the better approach. That is the conservative approach.
Mr. Trump, take 30 seconds.
Let me just, he wants to be a tough guy. A lot of times, you'll have, and it doesn't work very well with
How tough is it to take property from an elderly woman?
Let me talk. Quiet.
How tough is it?
A lot of times.
Do you regret at all that your name's on the building?
I think everyone knows that I'm gone. Atlantic City was a place that I really loved. I did it for a long time in Atlantic City, but a lot of people say when I left, that's when it went bad. And in one way, I'm honored by that statement, but in another way, I feel badly about Atlantic City.
After me, it can all go to hell. Nobody cares, right? If that's sort of the motto of every megalomaniac.
I have never gone bankrupt, by the way. I have never. But out of hundreds of deals,
but sir,
excuse me,
that's your line. But your companies have gone bankrupt.
Out of what am I saying?
He's right to say, as he does on the campaign trail now, that he did not personally go bankrupt. But that's only because he was too big to go bankrupt. The banks had to keep him alive and breathing. And since then, he's become a wealthy man by selling the name that was based on failed projects. the real things that he built, where are they?
Out of my research, my personal research, I'm glad to say that a new front against Trump is opening up. Now, this is written up in the Tax Wall Street Party daily briefing. You can find this at twsp.us. You can also find it at my website, tarpley.net, according to your convenience. And what is this? Trump went bankrupt, notoriously, in January of 1991. This is when he lost Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, bankrupt, Trump Airlines, taken over by his main lender, Citibank, and eventually it became part of U.S. Air. His main lender was Citibank. Now, if you go to Surviving the Cataclysm, my book on the world financial crisis going back several decades, I looked at the other day, did I write about Trump in that book? And it turns out I did. And I listed him as one of the main people who was getting loans, credits, hundreds of millions of dollars from Citibank. Now, after the crash of 1987, the big stock market panic, October 1987, the effect of that, as so often happens, if the stock market crashes, that often translates into a real estate crisis a couple of years later. And that's what we've had. I mean, we've had it more recently. But from 1987, 88, 89, and 1990, there was a big real estate crisis all across the United States. And you'd had a bunch of the banks, including Citibank, most importantly. Citibank, under Walter Wriston, had invested in Latin American loans, right? Latin American sovereign loans. And they had gotten burned when they had the Mexico and Argentina crises in the early to middle 1980s. So at that point, they said, well, forget that. We're going to go into real estate. That's much more controllable. But then after the crash of 1987, the real estate began to collapse. And the big warning sign on this was the Bank of New England went bankrupt. So with that happening, there was obviously the possibility of a great banking panic. And that was what the Federal Reserve System under Alan Greenspan and the U.S. Treasury, including the controller of the currency, they were answerable to the Secretary of the Treasury, Nick Brady. Nick Brady, of course, a Bushman, appointed by Bush the Elder. And this was a guy who had designed the plunge protection team. In other words, the White House Working Group on Financial Markets comes out of the Brady report, and that report was delivered, I think, in January of 1988, in the last days of Reagan. Nick Brady came forward and he said, remember, if you keep the price of the Chicago future above the price of the underlying New York stock, the program trader will sell the Chicago future and buy the underlying stock in New York so we can updraft everything. But now they were faced with the bankruptcy of Citibank. So Thanksgiving 1990, Citibank was silently seized by federal regulators. Citibank had lent money to Robert Campo, the department store king, Donald Trump, there it is, Olympia and York, real estate firm, bankrupt. That's a family, I think, in Canada. John Portman, Mountley and Ransworth Trust, and so forth, and when stores were going bankrupt and so forth. The New York Fed seized control of Citibank and would retain that control for a reported 2.5 years. A small army of 300 federal bank regulators occupied Citibank's headquarters. Reed was obliged to cut the Citibank, Citicorp dividend and suspend it. 11,000 employees were fired. And John Reed, the head of the bank, starting in November 1990, had to go to Washington every month to report to the Fed system, Greenspan, and the controller of the currency over at the Treasury. You've got Citibank with hundreds of millions of dollars lent to Trump, right? We've always said Trump is simply a mask for Wall Street banks. His so-called business empire is nothing but a walking, talking real estate investment trust coming from Wall Street, sort of administered and public relations and hokum and hooey from Trump. But he's in trouble, right? His Taj Mahal that opened during 1990 is already failing just as it started. He's got the Trump Castle casino. That's in big trouble. His Trump airline is losing money. He can't make it work. So he's facing bankruptcy. Now, the trick is he's trying to avoid personal bankruptcy because he considers that to be a public relations no-no, that he's not going to be this splendid figure of the successful businessman if he has to go through Chapter 11 bankruptcy personally. That he's trying to avoid that. And he's trying to get the taxpayers, you suckers out there, to pick up the tab. So what happens is there's a landmark article in the Wall Street Journal, Neil Barsky, June 4th, 1990, a stunning report on Trump's debt problems, layoffs at the Taj Mahal, layoffs at the Trump shuttle, failed attempts to either sell properties or get new loans. The big problem was Trump had insisted, he kept saying, if you put my name on a casino, a hotel, or an airline, you raise the inherent value. Well, the shuttle had lost $85 million since it had been acquired by Trump, and he plastered his name on the airplanes. And the same thing with the Trump Taj Mahal, also losing money. It was known to everybody that Trump was bankrupt. It took him until January 1991, 7 months after the Wall Street Journal, for him to finally declare bankruptcy of the Taj Mahal. So he loses control of the Trump shuttle because it reverts to Citibank, who's the main lender. But he's got other credits out from Citibank and also from other banks. One of them, Manufacturers Hanover Trust, is going to disappear in the course of this. Now, the question is, will Trump be allowed to avoid personal bankruptcy? And how much is he going to be able to keep? The creditors are obviously up in arms. Why would we be stuck with the worst guy in town, says one group of people that he's fleecing. Now, Trump is able to keep ownership of this yacht, right? He's got this famous yacht, which is the Nadila. It was owned by Adnan Khashoggi, a gun runner and drug runner. He's an Iran-Contra figure, a Saudi. Trump then bought it. He refurbished it. Now it's called the Trump Princess. So Trump is able to keep that yacht, supposedly the most glamorous yacht in the world. Eventually, he's going to sell it to, I think, Prince Talal of Saudi Arabia. So Trump is able to stick the lender on the yacht with $500,000 a month, $500,000 per month real estate and upkeep charge. He's able to reduce his obligations by $750 million, and he gets to hold on to many of his properties. The West Side Rail Yards, this Mar-a-Lago Parvenu Palace in Florida. So Trump celebrates the fact that he didn't have to do personal bankruptcy. How about this? The Trump Castle agreement, the way this worked was Trump Castle was about to go bankrupt. So Fred Trump, the KKK father of Donald Trump, sends an attorney over to the Trump Castle casino with $3.5 million check. So what they did was he'd say, I have $3.5 million here in a check. I need to buy some gambling chips. So it's a huge cash infusion into the gambling casino. And as long as it doesn't go bankrupt, Fred Trump can then turn around anytime he wants and say, I want to cash my chips back in and get his $3.5 million back. I mean, that looks like obstruction of justice or fraudulent bankruptcy or non-bankruptcy and so forth. So it's a sweetheart bankruptcy. Now, here's the thing. Trump comes out of that without personal bankruptcy. He keeps the West Side Rail Yards. He keeps the Mar-a-Lago. He keeps the Trump Castle. He keeps his name on a lot of these things because he says he gets paid for his name. Every detail of that bankruptcy or not was approved by Citibank. But of course, Citibank was in receivership. It means that every detail of Trump's bankruptcy reorganization had to be approved by the New York Federal Reserve, by Alan Greenspan at the Federal Reserve System, and by Nick Brady, Bushman, Secretary of the Treasury and designer of the plunge protection team. So you get the idea? He's an insider. He gets a bailout. According to D'Antonio, a lot of people began to see that Trump was considered too big to fail. Too big to fail. Isn't that what you guys hate? You storm Trumpers out there? He's so wealthy and he's such an insider that he gets a sweetheart bankruptcy while you are going to be evicted from your house for a couple of $1,000s. But instead, Donald Trump is going to get to keep his business empire intact and keep posturing and playing the role, right? Keep appearing on Robin Leach, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Yes, that's Donald Trump. And he's doing all that at taxpayer expense. The little man, the taxpayer, is coughing up and bleeding so that Trump can continue this play acting, right? This imposter role that he plays, right? That he's a successful businessman. He's not a successful businessman. He's a business failure who privatizes the profits and socializes the losses. And isn't that what you're supposed to be fighting?
National investigative correspondent Michael Isikoff sat down with Trump and questioned him about his business dealings. The questions went to the heart of the very thing that Trump claims makes him a credible candidate, his business success.
You've clearly had some big successes in the business world, but you've also had some big failures. And let's go straight.
No, I don't think I've had big failures. Donald Trump has always been very, very successful. And so when you say failures, I don't think I've had failures, but let's go ahead. Ask me about a couple.
Okay, Trump hotels and casinos filed for bankruptcy protection 3 times in 6 years.
Okay, let me explain it to you. Very simple.
Isn't that a failure?
Not really. I mean, look, it worked out very well for me. It was very successful. I then levered the company. I took it public. So I had a relatively small piece of the company. And what happened is Philadelphia...
Wait a second, you were chairman of the board.
Excuse me.
You were chairman of the board.
I was chairman, but I didn't run the company. I had nothing to do with running the company. Management ran the company.
You were paid $2 million a year.
Excuse me. I didn't run the company. I'm just telling you.
So what were you paid $2 million a year for?
Excuse me. Because of my genius, okay?
Excuse me. Genius. He had 3 bankruptcy filings in 6 years for Trump hotel and casinos. Genius? But that's just the beginning. Trump's habit of slapping his name on other people's products has also landed him in court.
There are also some ongoing lawsuits in which investors in Trump projects are suing you, claiming they were deceived. They thought they were buying into a Trump project and discovered it was only a licensing deal. Trump Tower, Tampa. You were down there for the groundbreaking. You said this was going to be a spectacular project that was going to redefine Tampa's skyline. In fact, you weren't an investor in the project at all, and it's never been built.
It was just a licensing deal. I was not the developer of those sites. I licensed the name Trump to those buildings. In case you haven't heard, there was a market collapse. And these people did better than most other people in Florida because they got some of their money back, and they may get more of it back.
They're still suing you.
Oh, yeah, I think it's working out very nicely. I think it's working out.
I'm not sure the investors would agree. That's why they're in court. But it does look like these deals do work out for one guy at the end, Donald Trump. Now, he has a theory as to why that is.
Do you think it's fair to say that sometimes you exaggerate?
I don't think I exaggerate any more than anybody else. I think that I have a great grasp of numbers. I have a great grasp of values. I'm worth many, many billions of dollars. You may very well be impressed, even you, with all your negative questions about very small things.
Even one of your friends said that your real genius is for self-promotion. You're a modern-day P.T. Barnum.
Well, I think my real genius is not actually in promotion. I think I build great product, great locations, and everybody says, oh, gee, what a great salesman he is. It's this. It's not my salesmanship.
It's what?
This. You know what that is? It's the brain power.
What do you think is stronger, Trump's brain power or Charlie Sheen's tiger blood? All right, well, actually, let's bring in NBC's national investigative correspondent, Michael Isikoff.
I don't think he appreciated being challenged on some of his spin on some of what have clearly been business failures. But, you know, bizarrely, the thing he got most exercised about is what his net worth is. I cited Forbes magazine estimate of $2.4 billion to him, and he corrected me. He said, no, Forbes has more recently in its international edition upped it to 2.7, and of course he claims it's about $7 billion. We won't really know for sure unless he declares for president and then fills out that financial disclosure form.
Michael, we actually we have that piece of the video. I love it, so I want to make sure that everybody sees it. Let's run that.
How much are you worth?
a lot of money, and you may very well see that number in about 70 days or 80 days. Forbes said 2.7 billion. Okay. And 2.7 is very low. It's much lower than the actual number that I may be showing to people and to the rest of the world in a couple of months. If I run, shortly thereafter, I will send a statement of financial and cash and how much debt and all that, and I think people are going to be very impressed. It's actually much bigger than any numbers I've seen.
I don't think he wants the world to know what he's actually worth.
That is certainly one theory out there. You know, there was a New York Times reporter, Tim O'Brien, who wrote a book a few years ago who talked to some sources who suggested Trump was really only worth a couple of $100 million. Trump sued Tim O'Brien, the reporter, for defamation, claiming to be called a multimillionaire rather than a multi-billionaire had somehow defamed his reputation. The lawsuit got tossed out of court, and Trump then appealed. And in fact, the appellate argument was heard only a couple of weeks ago in a Jersey City courtroom. Trump showed up and was slipping notes to his lawyers. He clearly is very exercised about this issue. But will we ultimately see that document that lays out his wealth?
But you know, you had another great part of this interview about Trump University, which was great.
Why did you call it a university? Because we didn't know there was any rules or regulations about using the name university. We didn't
check that out?
I think probably they felt that we would have qualified. If we didn't qualify, that's fine. We changed the name.
And people would pay money to hear you.
Sure. They pay money. Why? Am I supposed to do it for free?
Well, people have to pay, as I understand it, up to $35,000 for the gold seminars. And
they did. There's very little problem with Trump University. There's very little. I think we have one or two little lawsuits out of thousands of people that went through it. We have one or two little lawsuits. There's one in California. There's a little lawsuit.
Just a little lawsuit. He seems to be involved in a lot of little lawsuits. But what was this? Was this a real university that have classes, professors, or?
It's not in any real university in the sense you and I would understand it. It was basically a series of seminars. The first thing they asked you to do, according to some of the students who went through it, is to up the limit on your credit card to $35,000 so you can then afford the gold seminar, in which you really learn the secrets of Donald Trump's success and learn how to become a millionaire. State regulators all over the country have gotten complaints about this. There is a class action lawsuit being filed by former students in California. And as we reported in the piece last night, the Texas Attorney General's office had opened up an investigation into possible deceptive trade practices against Trump University, and only dropped it after Trump University told the state Attorney General's office they would stop doing business in Texas. In effect, they dropped out of Texas entirely.
Trump, you have way less money than you claim. You may have a portfolio of properties, but that's not liquid. Where's your cash? How much cash, right? You ain't got no jack in your jeans. You're nothing, Trump. Show us the long green, right? Don't point to a building. Show us a bank balance, right? How about publishing your taxes, Trump? What are you hiding? You've been audited? You're a victim? Come on, publish your taxes.
Hugh, go ahead. Mr. Trump.
Are you going to
ask
anybody else a question?
No, this goes to me.
Every single question comes to me?
Mr. Trump,
I know I'm good for the ratings, but it's a little bit ridiculous.
No, but Mr. Trump, a year ago, you told me on my radio show, the audio and the transcript are out there on YouTube, that you would release your tax returns. True. Are you going back on your
No, I'm not.
commitment?
First of all, very few people listen to your radio show. That's the good news. Let me just tell you. Which happens to be true. Check out the ratings. Look, let me just tell you something. I want to release my tax returns, but I can't release it while I'm under an audit. We're under a routine audit. I've had it for years. I get audited. And obviously, if I'm being audited, I'm not going to release a return. As soon as the audit is done, I love it.
Donald Trump joins us by phone. Mr. Trump, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's talk about your tax return. Under new pressure from the Clinton campaign, Secretary Clinton talking about that the last couple of days. I just have a bottom line question for you. Yes or no? Do you believe voters have a right to see your tax returns before they make a final decision?
I don't think they do, but I do say this. I will really gladly give them. They're not going to learn anything, but it's under routine audit. When the audit ends, I'm going to present them. That should be before the election. I hope it's before the election. But when the audit ends, I've had even journalists say that, no, nobody should give until audits are over. I've had journalists say that. So I think there's no. I sort of have to laugh when Clinton says it. Mrs. Clinton said that I should give my tax returns. What about all the missing emails that she's got? When is she going to give the missing emails, or her Goldman Sachs speeches? When is she going to give that? Very, very great hypocrite. But as far as I'm concerned, I want to give it as soon as possible. As soon as the audit ends, I'll give it. I've been under audit. Every year they audit me. I have wealthy friends that never get audited. I get audited every single year.
But as you know, Mr. Trump, the audit is no excuse. The IRS has made it very clear that an audit is not a bar to public release. It is entirely your choice. President Nixon, Richard Nixon, released his tax returns even though he was under audit. And when you were seeking a casino license in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, you released the returns to the state officials even though you were under audit.
I am under audit now, and as soon as the audit ends, I'll release my returns. It's a very simple thing.
Sir,
if you look at many others feel the same way. And almost every lawyer will tell you the same thing. When you're under audit, you finish the audit before you release. I have no problem. And it should be, and I hope it's before the election.
But, sir, if you were willing to
release...
release...
And by the way, people are going to learn nothing. You know, I put in financials, 100 pages worth of financials that show that I built a company that's worth more than $10 billion. It shows cash, it shows cash flows, it shows everything. You learn very little from tax returns, but nevertheless, when the audit is complete, I will release. I have no problem with it.
A couple of follow-ups to that, though. If you were willing to release your tax returns to get a casino license, why shouldn't voters see them before they make you commander-in-chief?
Well, because at the time it didn't make any difference to me. Now it does. If you take a look at the picture that we sent you, where the tax returns are probably 10 feet high when you stack them on top, and linked and very complex. I built a massive business, and I want to make sure that everything's perfect. It's a routine audit. I want to get through the audit first, and that's what I'll do. There have been many presidents that have not shown their tax returns.
Actually, every single nominee since 1976 has released their tax
returns.
returns.
Before 1976, most people didn't do it. I mean, it used to be a secret thing. I don't want it to be secret, but I do want the audit to get finished.
Before that, Richard Nixon released his returns, as I said, even though they were under. But to get to your point, on the one hand, you show that stack of tax returns. On the other hand, you say that people can't learn anything from them. They can actually learn quite a lot. They can learn your sources of income. They can learn whether you have any foreign sources of income or whether you have any Swiss bank accounts or other offshore accounts. Do you?
I'll tell you right now, I do not. And I don't have Swiss bank accounts. I don't have offshore. I really have a very, very clean company. And believe me, if I didn't, it would have been reported by 200 groups, because there's nobody that has more reporting or more scrutiny than I have. I've given my financials. They're extraordinary, and we would have read if they weren't. But believe me, when I released my financials, George, and we sent them down to federal elections, there was a feeding frenzy by the media, and they reported, wow, that is a great company. And I have built a great, great company. And by the way, when you look at numbers, when you look at incomes, when you look at all of the things, or most of the things that you talked about, that's reported on the financials.
It's not reported on the financials. What the financials don't show also is your tax rate. They don't show whether you paid a low tax rate or no tax rate.
I find very hard to pay as little tax as possible, and I've said that for the last 2 years. I fight very hard because this country wastes our money. They take our tax money and they throw it down the drain. They spend $4 trillion in the Middle East, and we can't fix a road or a bridge. And I fight very hard. I consider it an expense because, frankly, our country doesn't know what they're doing with our money or our tax money, and that's part of the problem. So I fight very hard to pay as little tax as possible.
What is your tax rate?
It's none of your business. You'll see it when I release. But I fight very hard to pay as little tax as possible.
You know, we've talked about this several times over the last several years. I first asked you about this in 2011, and you said you would release your tax returns then. You were thinking of running for president when President Obama releases his birth certificate. He did. Then you said you would release your tax returns when Secretary Clinton released her email. She has turned over all the emails in her possession.
She didn't turn over all. There's plenty missing. I read yesterday where there are a lot of emails missing. I know she's a good friend of yours, and I know you worked for him and you didn't reveal it. But, she did not turn over her emails. There are a lot of emails missing.
There were emails from her staffers missing. She turned over the emails she has.
There are emails missing all over the place. The whole thing is a scam. There are emails missing all over the place.
But you have also said then that you were just going through all of the returns and you released them as soon as you went through them. Now you're throwing up the audit.
I never said that at all. I said to you that I will release them upon the completion of the audit like anybody else. I was interviewed last night or the other night by Greta Van Susteren, who's a lawyer. She said, I happen to agree with you. Until the audit is complete, you shouldn't release them.
Mr. Trump, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
The Daily Telegraph has put out a very interesting article about Trump and Donald Trump, the person, and the Trump Soho hotel and condominium project of 2007-2008. I would subtitle this Sater and Sater. S-A-T-Y-R, that's Trump, and S-A-T-E-R, Felix Sater. He's the Russian gangster, jailbird, convict, stabbed somebody with a broken margarita glass, served time for that and other things. That's who's doing it. And at this time, Felix Sater from the underworld was essentially an associate of Trump's, a senior advisor to Trump is what he had on his business card that they gave him. He had a Trump Organization email, a Trump Organization office, a Trump Organization phone number. So the idea was they were going to do this transaction as an equity purchase, right? Buying a share of the ownership of Trump Soho was what Trump was planning to do. But then they realized, oh my God, if we do this, we'll have to pay taxes. So they said, well, we'll do fraud. We're going to do tax fraud. We're going to say it's not really an equity purchase. It's a loan. And that is one way that you can disguise an equity purchase. And the IRS and the New York State authorities know that. There's also a question about partnerships in the state of New York. So Trump has defrauded U.S. taxpayers of tens of millions of dollars on that transaction alone. And he says, oh, I'm a businessman. That's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, are you supposed to do it? Is that your code of ethics? That you essentially asset strip the American middle class because they're the ones who have to jump in and pay when you essentially carry out tax evasion and this tax fraud scenario. And then, of course, he's asked in a recent deposition, Trump is, hey, Trump, who is Felix Sater? Do you know him? And he says, oh, no, I have no idea. He could walk in here. I wouldn't recognize him. So there's another perjury count on Trump.
Donald Trump has faced some serious backlash, as you know, for some of the things he has said on the campaign trail. But this morning, he could be in hot water for what he said under oath before running for office about his relationship with a convicted felon who once was tied to organized crime. ABC's chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross is here with that story. Good morning, Brian.
Well, good morning, Robin. With the possible exceptions of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, American politicians have a well-established record of outrageous statements and stretching the truth. But in the case of Donald Trump, his critics now say he's crossed the line between stretching the truth and telling lies. Trump's statements about Muslims and the 9/11 attacks have raised the biggest questions about his truthfulness, including his unsupported and widely denied claim that thousands of Arabs in New Jersey celebrated after the attacks.
Thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down.
Then Trump went after a reporter, Serge Kovaleski, who said Trump was wrong about the alleged New Jersey celebration, appearing to mock Kovaleski and his disability.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
Trump said he wasn't mocking the reporter because he did not know what he looked like.
I don't know him.
But the reporter said they met many times and were once on a first-name basis.
Raise your hand, please.
Now there are questions about what Trump said under oath in a civil lawsuit about one of the people who helped develop the Trump Soho Hotel and Condominium in New York City, the man on the right with Trump at the hotel launch party, Felix Sater, a twice-convicted felon once tied to organized crime and a massive stock scam, someone Trump now maintains he barely knows. In his videotaped testimony obtained by ABC News, Trump said he could not even recall what Sater looked like.
If he were sitting in the room right now, I really wouldn't know what he looked like.
But an ABC News investigation found Sater, an executive at a real estate company, was actively involved in a number of proposed deals with Trump. Here they were together in Denver in 2005. And in 2010, 3 years after Sater's mob ties became public, the Trump Organization issued Sater business cards identifying him as a senior advisor to Donald Trump, with a Trump Organization email address and phone number. Trump's lawyer says Sater was an independent broker, but no deals came out of it. Whatever the relationship, it appears to be very much a sore point for Trump.
Why didn't you go to Felix Sater and say, you're connected with the mafia,
you're fired.
Well, 2 years ago, Trump cut short a BBC interview after being pressed about Sater.
I hate to do this, but I do have that big group of people waiting, so I have to.
Okay, now hold on, one last question.
Trump later said under oath he did not remember being interviewed by the BBC.
Do you recall doing the interview?
No, I don't.
Trump wouldn't agree to be interviewed by us at all about Sater and instead sent his lawyer who told us about the convicted felon, you can't do background checks on everyone.
Unfortunately, if you've been watching the presidential race, you know that we need to stand up now more than ever. Just yesterday, it came out that Donald Trump had said back in 2007 that he was, quote, excited for the real estate market to crash because, quote, I've always made more money in bad markets than good. That's right. The rest of us were horrified by what happened during the 2008 financial crisis, by what happened to millions of families like Mr. Estrada's that were forced out of their homes. But Donald Trump was drooling over the idea of a housing meltdown because it meant he could buy up more property on the cheap. What kind of a man does that? What kind of a man roots for people to get thrown out of their house, roots for people to get thrown out of their jobs, to root for people to lose their pensions, to root for two little girls in Clark County, Nevada, to end up living out of a van? What kind of a man does that? I'll tell you exactly what kind of a man does that. It is a man who cares about no one but himself. A small, insecure money grubber who doesn't care who gets hurt so long as he makes a profit off it. What kind of a man does that? A man who will never be president of the United States. Now, sometimes Trump claims that he is tough on Wall Street, tough on the guys who cheated people like Mr. Estrada. You may have heard him say that. But now, he's singing a very different song. Now that he has sewn up the Republican nomination, Donald Trump is dropping all pretense. He's kissing the fannies of the poor, misunderstood Wall Street bankers. But the American people are a whole lot smarter than Donald Trump thinks they are. The American people are not looking for a bait and switch. They are not looking for a man so desperate for power that he will say or do anything to get elected. You know, take the hint, Donald. The time for letting big banks call all the shots in Washington, it's over. And I just want to make one more point about Donald Trump, a point that won't quite fit into a Twitter war. But the last point that I want to make really sums up Donald Trump and what he's all about. His taxes. We don't know what Donald Trump pays in taxes because he is the first presidential nominee in 40 years to refuse to disclose his tax returns. I mean, look, maybe he is just a lousy businessman and he doesn't want everyone to know that he's not as rich as he claims to be. But we do know this. The last time that his taxes were made public, Donald Trump paid nothing. Zero taxes before. And for all we know, he's paying zero taxes today, and he's proud of it. 2 weeks ago, he said that he was more than happy to dodge taxes because he doesn't want to throw his money, quote, down the drain. Donald Trump likes being a billionaire, but he doesn't think that the rules that apply to everyone else should apply to him. But let's be clear, Donald Trump didn't get rich on his own. His businesses rely on roads and bridges paid for by the rest of us. His businesses rely on workers who are educated by the rest of us. They rely on police and firefighters who protect the rest of us and who are supported by the rest of us. Donald Trump and his businesses are protected by a world-class military that defends us abroad and keeps us safe at home, and the rest of us pay to support. And that goes double for Donald Trump. He inherited a fortune from his father, kept it going by scamming people, declaring bankruptcy, and then skipping out on what he owed. Nurses and teachers and dock workers, they pay their fair share to keep Trump's businesses going. Programmers and engineers and small business owners, they pay their fair share to support our military, who show courage and sacrifice every day. Donald Trump thinks that supporting them is throwing money down the drain. Then I say we throw Donald Trump down the drain. When anyone builds something terrific, they should get to keep a big hunk of it. But they should also pay a fair share forward so that the next kid and the next kid and the next kid will have a chance to build something too. That's how we build a real future in America. Wall Street accountability and Fed reform, minimum wage and overtime pay, fair scheduling, a livable planet, workers' rights and racial justice. You know the list, you know the stakes, you know the challenges. But I know one thing. Whether we're talking about Donald Trump or we're talking about changing this country, you can't win if you don't fight. And we're in this fight, and we're in it to win.
I would actually like to compliment Senator Elizabeth Warren for the personal counteroffensive that she has been waging. You could do a whole lot worse for the Democratic Party than put her on the ticket. You could put her at the top of the ticket or second place on the ticket, right? A Bernie Warren ticket would be one of the most powerful, and it would also be security because the incentive for assassination would not be there. Very interesting point. I wonder if they think of it.
Police are investigating whether someone shot at the Bernie Sanders campaign offices last night. Metro says they got a call from the offices there on Rainbow and Charleston about midnight. You can see they have a patch over a hole in the window where the campaign says they found a bullet hole. So far, police have not found a bullet, but they took a report for rather malicious destruction of property and say they are investigating. It is the same office where the Politics Now team interviewed Bernie Sanders yesterday.
Our country is in serious trouble. We don't have victories anymore. We used to have victories, but we don't have them. When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. They are not our friend, believe me. But they're killing us economically. The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. Thank you. It's true. And these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East.
Are you going to have a massive deportation force?
You're going to have a deportation force. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
We are a generous and we are a compassionate people. And we are far better than the sort of fascist rhetoric that you hear spewed out by Donald Trump. The enduring symbol of our country is not the barbed wire fence. It is the Statue of Liberty.
There's another front in this battle, and it is this. That's the political front. And if Donald Trump wants to start a registry in our country of people by faith, he can start with me, and I will sign up as one who is totally opposed to his fascist appeals that wants to vilify American Muslims. That can do more damage to our democracy than anything.
All right, that's time. Mr. Trump joins us now on the phone. He wants to make the case. Mr. Trump, thank you for joining us. Your proposition is plain: ban all Muslims until we can figure out what's going on. People are asking you how you would do that. I say let's put that to the side. It's irrelevant. It's about the concept. You have leaders from your own party in the key states of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. You have galvanized political rivals all saying this is un-American and extreme and that it makes you a fascist. How do you respond?
Well, I totally disagree. You take a look, Chris, at what's going on, and it is disgraceful. First of all, you know, people quickly forget World Trade Center 1, World Trade Center number 2, and you take a look at all of the things that are happening having to do with the problems. Now you have the problem in California where, and miraculously, $28,000 just found in this guy's, just put into this guy's account, this horrible, you know, person, this killer, this maniac, into his account. I have no doubt that we have no choice but to do exactly what I said until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on, because we have a problem in this country. You look at Paris, you look at the carnage that took place in Paris, but look at Paris beyond that. Paris is no longer the beautiful, gorgeous city with all. Paris has a tremendous lot of problems. And they have areas in Paris that have been radicalized where the police refuse to go in and look at it. They refuse to
well aware.
take part in it. You look at London. You look at other places.
We are well aware. We are well aware. But, Mr. Trump, here's the point.
No, wait a minute, Chris. You're well aware. You say that so routinely. You're well aware.
Well, because I've been on the ground. I've been in those communities. I've talked to the French authorities.
It's totally out of control.
Well,
it's so dangerous.
That's what you say. The police are all over that country right now, and they're doing a lot of policing. But more importantly, to your point, I would say it is the opposite reality. You see the French being more embracing of people around them. You see them living their lives. You see them refusing to accept fear as a basis for behavior. Whereas here, what you're doing in the country that is known as a symbol of freedom is saying we're too afraid to be inclusive. We're going to reject the promise of America and ban an entire religion, even though we need to do things on a case-by-case basis. And it seems as though you're acting out of fear, not making us look strong, and rejecting what America is all about. UK's not doing this. France isn't doing this.
Chris, and don't tell me about Paris. Paris is under tremendous siege. They are absolutely in fear in Paris. Don't tell me Paris is not.
They have heightened awareness. They do not have fear, and they're not acting out of it. That's why they're letting in refugees.
They don't have fear. Of course they have fear. Of course
it's how you behave in that environment.
I have people that are friends living in Paris. They want to leave. They're petrified.
But what are they doing? Are they banning all Muslims?
Well, let's see. Maybe they're going to have to. Maybe they're going to have to do something.
That's not even on the table.
Look, I'm talking about a temporary situation until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on, Chris.
The timing is irrelevant.
Listen, we had the World Trade Center number 1. We had World Trade Center number 2. We had many other things happen. Then the other day we had the California attack where these two animals, they're total animals, they became radicalized and they wanted to do far more damage than that. What's even more disturbing, if you terms of looking into the future, is other people knew what they were doing. There were bombs, pipe bombs laying all over the floor. Right. They had other people that knew what was going on, Chris, and nobody reported it. They used the excuse they didn't want to be racial profilers. They wanted to be politically correct. By the way, the people that said that, I think in their own way, they're guilty. The mother knew. The parents knew. Everybody knew. Now even his father is under watch. They just found out.
You use politically correct.
Chris,
this isn't about being politically correct.
We can be politically correct. But
this isn't about being politically correct.
Country, and we should solve it, because you're going to have many more World Trade Centers if you don't solve it. Many, many more, and probably beyond the World Trade Center.
I don't see the point of scaring people with the possible when the reality is we haven't had another World Trade Center. You and I both lived through it. We both lost people there. We know what the real deal is. We know who celebrated and we didn't. We know what's scaring people and what the reality is. We haven't had those kinds of attacks. The security network has held up, and one of the reasons is our unity as a people. And I don't understand how you can see banning an entire religion as a way of saying anything other than we are what ISIS says we are. We want a war against Islam. That's who America is. And as you know, or you should know, that is not who America is, Mr. Trump.
Chris, we are at war with radical Islamic terrorism.
Right,
we
not
are at war,
all
whether
Islam.
you like it or whether you
Not
don't like
all
it.
Islam.
We have a president that made a fool out of himself the other night. He doesn't even mention the term. He refuses to use the term. Nobody understands why. Hillary Clinton, because she's afraid of the president because of her email scandal, Hillary Clinton refuses to use the term. If you're not going to even use the term, you're never going to solve the
But
problem.
I don't get how you connect these dots because of the email scandal.
Put it through your head.
Look,
they are
everybody knows who we're at war with.
They are looking to do great damage. You look at what's going on in the Middle East. They're chopping off heads. They are looking to come over to other places too. And they want the jihad.
Right,
it's very simple.
But you're
they
saying,
want the jihad.
What does that mean, they want the jihad?
Chris.
Well, you can't just throw out notions without any kind of checking of them. You know, this is what got you wound up on the Philadelphia Inquirer front page, like Hitler. They got you in a personage of Hitler right now, a characterization of that.
Philadelphia Inquirer, another newspaper.
Well, I know you're going to
business.
disparage whoever
Listen,
criticizes you, and I'm waiting for that as well. Let me ask you this, Mr. Trump. We've had a couple of conversations on and off camera about the GOP being fair to you, that you're not going to do a third-party thing. You're going to stay true to your pledge as long as they're fair. Can you blame the GOP for moving against you after saying something like this? Can you accuse them of being unfair if they say, listen, we can't have our nominee be someone who's tearing at the fabric of what America is. We're going to have to, do something against you at the convention or whatever they come up with. Would you still hold to the pledge because you've created your own problem?
Well, look, there's no problem. I'm just doing the right thing, Chris. See, I'm just doing the right thing. I could have very well just rested on my poll numbers, which you just released, and they're phenomenal. I'm leading everybody, and I could rest on them very nicely, and there's no problem. And if they go up, they go down. I have to do the right thing. I am talking about a measure. It's a measure that ends. It's not a measure that's, in stone. We have to find out what we're doing. We're letting people into our country. We don't know who they are. We have people here right now that are getting $28,000 miraculously over the last little while deposited in their account that they're using for very sinister purposes. There are like these two, this husband and wife, this horrendous, horrible husband and wife. You have many other people like that in this country. You have many other people that are having checks deposited in their account to do destruction, and we have to find out what we're doing. And if the Republican Party likes it, that's fine. If they don't like it, that's fine also. As you know, I'm leading in virtually every single poll. I think you just came out with one yesterday in Iowa. I'm crushing it in Iowa. I'm doing great with the people of Iowa, who I love. And frankly, I think that people will agree with me. Hey, look, I had thousands of people. You had your reporters there. I had thousands of people last night, right? Mm-hmm. At an event last night in South Carolina, a great place. Thousands of people couldn't get in. We got standing ovations as soon as I mentioned it. I hadn't even finished the sentence. Now, what I also said, and it was very important, I made the statement, it's a shutdown until our country's representatives can figure out what is going on. That's important, because that doesn't mean it's permanent. It's temporary.
But I'll tell you what,
we have to get our arms around it. We don't want to be like Paris, where you can't go into the city, where you can't go into sections where their police are afraid to go into certain sections of Paris. They are petrified.
That is a mythology. They're doing operations by the hundreds. They're getting a handle on the situation. But most importantly, they're staying together. And I think that your poll data actually reflects a responsibility on you, Mr. Trump, because people are listening to you. And America is great because it is united. Our diversity is our greatest strength.
To me because I have common sense. That's why. Because most of these politicians,
this doesn't sound like common sense to a lot of people.
Or common sense, and that's why I'm doing well. I have common sense. I know what has to be done, and we don't want to have a situation like Paris, and we don't want to have another World Trade Center, which, by the way, they tried to knock down twice. The first time they were unsuccessful. Right. We don't want that, Chris. We need intelligence in this country. We need a certain toughness in this country, or we're going to end up like a lot of other places, and we're not going to have a country left.
So they get these, right now have gone, they're out on the battlefield, trying to kill everybody in front of them, including you folks, I hate to tell you. So we get Bergdahl, and they get 5 of the killers that they've wanted for many years.
Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Mr. Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So we're going through these straws in the wind that keep coming about the pro-Trump terrorist October surprise. Trump doesn't have to know anything about it. We're talking about those intelligence factions above and behind Trump, his controllers, the handlers and controllers of his handlers and controllers. And if they see a chance, they may well strike out the pro-Trump October surprise. And that can be really August, September, October, I guess. Although, again, in the era of early voting, it gets to be more and more important to give yourself a couple of weeks of lead time if you're going to plan one of these things. That's Trump. And we're looking at these intelligence factions that are supporting Trump. And you'll remember that this has been now discussed in quite a few different places, right? In the mainstream media, it has been a large-scale hangout, limited, but for example, this past week we've had CNN writing about this. They're talking about an October surprise. Essentially what it is if you see last week, right, the Egypt Air incident, destruction of the plane or disappearance of that plane, right, 50 or 60 people on board, that displayed the rhetorical approach that different candidates will take. So Trump starts off by tweeting, "Looks like another terrorist attack. Airplane departed from Paris. When will we get tough, smart, and vigilant? Great hate and sickness." Trump writes on Twitter. Now, of course, he's blaming something that happened in France on, I guess, Clinton and Obama. Then he goes on, "Look at the carnage all over the world, including the World Trade Center." Well, that's, 15 years ago. San Bernardino, Paris, the USS Cole, more than 15 years ago. Brussels, and an unlimited number of other places. She and our totally ignorant president, so Clinton and Obama, won't even use the term radical Islamic terrorism. That's that favorite flourish of the Republicans that you got to pronounce the magic words, right? Magical thinking, wild, irrationalist thinking that if you say the magic words, you can then get rid of this bugaboo. And by the way, ask Hillary who blew up the plane last night. Another terrible but preventable tragedy. She has bad judgment and is unfit to serve as president at this delicate and difficult time in our country's history. So the word on that, of course, then is CNN notes that the back and forth between Trump and Clinton could foreshadow the political and temperamental reflexes of each candidate in the event of any October surprise attack against Americans. So there's another open reference to the idea of a planned, orchestrated, false flag terror attack that's designed to help Trump. Because, look, ask yourself, right, who does the establishment favor? Well, who gets $3 billion in free television media? Trump. Trump, the darling of Wall Street. Trump, who got a sweetheart bailout in 1991. The fascist madman Donald Trump gets all that. But also, look, Trump is now sitting pretty. He's poised, as we see in these quotes on Egypt here, or at least he thinks he is, he's poised to benefit from terrorism. If terrorism occurs, Trump will crow. Trump will triumph. And we will ask, cui bono, cui prodest? Who benefits? Cui prodest skelos is fecit, meaning the one who benefits from the crime is the one who did it, or at least is the prime suspect. Trump needs terrorism. Trump is going to rely on terrorism in order to get to the White House.
They're out on the battlefield, trying to kill everybody in front of them, including you folks, I hate to tell you.
Trump feeds off terrorism.
Listen, we had the World Trade Center #1. We had World Trade Center #2. We had many other things happen. Then the other day we had the California attack where these two animals, they're total animals, they became radicalized and they wanted to do far more damage than that. They are looking
Everybody
to come
knows
over.
who we're at war with.
They are looking to do great damage. You look at what's going on in the Middle East. They're chopping off heads. They are looking to come over to other places too. And they want the jihad.
Right,
it's very simple.
But you're
they
saying,
want the jihad.
You use politically correct.
Chris,
this isn't about being politically correct.
We can be politically correct. But
this isn't about being politically correct.
Country, and we should solve it because you're going to have many more World Trade Centers if you don't solve it. Many, many more, and probably beyond the World Trade Center.
I don't see the point of scaring people.
It's clear that there are key parts of the CIA, the FBI, the intelligence community in general, who would like to see Trump in the White House because they would run wild.
I have common sense. I know what has to be done. And we don't want to have a situation like Paris, and we don't want to have another World Trade Center, which, by the way, they tried to knock down twice. The first time they were unsuccessful. Right. We don't want that because
Donald Trump has called for registering Muslims like animals. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump is saying he would implement a database to track Muslims in the United States. He said this to NBC. We have the video. He says you just have to do it. You've got to implement it. And like most of his ideas, when asked how he will do it, he says he will do it through management. Take a look.
Beyond database, I mean, we should have a lot of systems. And today you can do it. But right now we have to have a border. We have to have strength. We have to have a wall. And we cannot let what's happening to this country happen.
But that's something your White House would like to implement.
Oh, I would certainly implement that. Absolutely.
What do you think the effect of that would be? How would that work?
It would stop people from coming in illegally. We have to stop people from coming in to our country illegally.
For Muslims specifically, how do you actually get them registered into a database?
It would be just good management.
Yeah.
What you have to do is good management procedures.
Yeah, I love it. Anytime he's asked, well, how would you actually do this crazy thing? Oh, I would just manage it. Maybe we're going to manage it. It's going to all happen. And of course, if you're going to register Muslims like animals, then you have to make sure there's a mandatory Christian database as well, and a mandatory Buddhist one, and a mandatory atheist one, and a mandatory spaghetti monster one, and whatever, because the government cannot favor or establish one religion over another. And logically following that, you can't put certain religions below others. The government already does that, though. We have holidays. We have federal holidays only for one religion, right? We have days off from school. Well, some states and cities have days off for more than one religion, but it is not for all religions. So we already see that happening. What Trump is suggesting is fascism. And I know sometimes people throw around ism labels wrongly, communism for what's just populist democracy or whatever else. If implemented, a mandatory tracking system for Muslims is fascism. Register the Muslims. People have been comparing it to the Holocaust, and I usually want to shy away from those comparisons when they're not apt, but this is just short of saying put an armband or a yellow star on if you're a Muslim.
Is it fair to call the Republican presidential frontrunner a neo-fascist? Carl Bernstein, who with his reporting partner broke the Watergate scandal, argues that Trump is the first presidential candidate in modern American history to embrace and embody the classic definition of fascism.
The word neo is crucial because it means new, and it's a peculiarly American kind of fascism. And fascism is about a maximum leader who is contemptuous of real democracy, of real democratic institutions, contemptuous of the press and a free press, who extols torture and violence, who incites hatreds. Fascism is about a maximum leader who is contemptuous of real democracy, of real democratic institutions, contemptuous of the press and a free press.
Donald Trump does not like the media. He recently told a crowd in Texas he would stop newspapers like the New York Times from publishing unfavorable articles.
I'm going to open up our libel laws so when they write purposely negative and horrible and false articles, we can sue them and win lots of money.
Who extols torture and violence.
The medieval times, I mean, we studied medieval times. Not since medieval times have people seen what's going on. I would bring back waterboarding, and I'd bring back a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding.
Mr. Trump, thank you.
Who incites hatreds.
This is the day we take our country back. Remember that. This is the day we take our country back. So I got a little notice in case you see the security guys. We have wonderful security guys. They said, Mr. Trump, there may be somebody with tomatoes in the audience. So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise. I promise. They won't be so much because the courts agree with us, too. What's going on in this country?
A neo-fascism about being a strong man, like a Juan Perón, about a cult of the self, as able to do all things if unencumbered by restraints of the law, of a constitution, of public acceptance and
is he dangerous?
Oversight. And is he dangerous? Yes, he's dangerous because of his thoughtlessness.
Stop the fascist Trump from becoming president of the United States. He is a Nazi and a fascist. In northern Italy, they have a wonderful term, Nazi-fascist. That was the last phase under the German occupation of northern Italy. Fascism, Nazism, mental illness, terrorism, organized crime, and Trump, who has now received almost $3 billion in free television, and he's a psychopath. Now, we are dealing with a psychopath. One of the writers, you're going to get to know some of the main writers on narcissism and related mental disorders. One guy called Macoby has written Narcissistic Leaders. He's already in his second edition. He wants to remind us that psychopaths operate at the lowest level of moral reasoning with no concern for the common good. This is, I submit, Trump. They have no remorse or guilt for self-serving actions that harm other people. You look at Trump's labor history and related things. Psychopaths are unable to build lasting relationships, and in the business world, the failures of the, in this case, narcissistic type, they build empires of debt. And of course, real estate is prone to debt, and Trump, more than anybody, is prone to debt. The difference between God and Trump is that God does not believe that he is Trump.
Good morning. Today, I'm very proud of myself.
What a great honor it must be for you to honor me tonight.
Trump, the brand. Donald Trump is a businessman, real estate developer, and mogul. But more than that, he is a brand. And that brand is larger than life. The Donald has brought his gold touch to a lot of different products. Our fave? Not the books, the buildings, or the booze, it's the board game.
My new game is Trump, the game.
Trump, the game where you deal for everything you've ever wanted to own.
Whether it's vodka, an airline, hotels, or casinos, if it's Trump, you can be sure it's tacky.
Because it's not whether you win or lose, it's whether you win.
Yes!
Play Trump, the game from Milton Bradley.
I think you'll like it.
You gotta give it to the Donald. He's great at finding strange new ways to feed his ego.
It's a little treat. You're going to see the nicest apartment in New York City. It's my apartment. I show this apartment to very few people. Presidents, kings.
One of his most successful is The Apprentice.
This is the chance to work for me at a huge salary.
The premise is pure Trump. He tells people what to do, how to do it, and has them battle for his approval. He even got a catchphrase.
You're fired.
And became one of TV's highest paid stars.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Would he paint the White House gold?
I think I'd do a really good job. I think I'd protect this country.
Wasn't it easier when Donald Trump was only famous for making money and getting divorced? Somewhere along the way, Trump went from an eccentric businessman with a quirky hairdo to a right-leaning political force with a really quirky hairdo.
It's really mine, you know? It's like,
While he's donated to candidates in both parties, Trump threw his toupee into the ring in 2011 as a potential Republican Party nominee.
If I decide to run, you'll have the great pleasure of voting for the man that will easily go down as the greatest president in the history of the United States. Me, Donald John Trump.
While Americans celebrated Obama's re-election, Trump was quietly sulking. Sorry, did we say quietly? We meant obnoxiously posting a barrage of hateful tweets. Actually, let's open this up to anything Trump has ever said on Twitter ever. What does he use his 140 characters for? Feuding with respected newsmen, quoting himself, bragging like it's going out of style, which it is, by the way, and name-calling. You stay classy, Donald Trump.
Let me tell you, I'm a really smart guy.
Please welcome the second worst tragedy ever to hit New York City. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald J. Trump.
I am really proud. I am really honored.
You may remember Dr. Justin Frank in 2004, How Time Flies. That was called Bush on the Couch, Inside the Mind of a President. Mind, of course, used advisedly. The finding was that he's a megalomaniac. Now, that's what we would need for Trump. Amazing that we don't have it. And of course, people don't want to do Trump because they're afraid, because he threatens to sue you. He threatens to bankrupt you, to destroy your petty resources, right? So a big fascist billionaire comes after just a little petty bourgeois here. Well, we have to fight no matter what. Now, who am I? What have I done? In 1988, I wrote the leaflet on the mental health of Dukakis that was distributed at the Atlanta Democratic National Convention, which seemed to have some influence on the 1988 election. I did this, not Lee Atwater. I had nothing to do with Lee Atwater, wouldn't know him. And then in 1992, George H.W. Bush, the unauthorized biography, I was able to put together an argument that Bush, the elder, he had a thyroid disorder, to be sure, but it was not Graves' disease. It was an altogether more serious malady called Basedoff's disease, and that this is leading then into what was called, remember, Operation Desert Storm. Underneath Desert Storm was a thyroid storm, in other words, a crisis of his diseased glandular endocrine system. Now, one of the big questions is, if you're going to spend $130 million, really, how do you classify Trump? What is the efficient way to make the American people understand what they're dealing with? He is, of course, a racist, and say so. He's a sexist and a misogynist. That, too, by all means. He is a xenophobe. Is correct, but it's inadequate. You might also add that he's a nativist, a know-nothing, a white supremacist, an egomaniac, and so on down the line. This is fine, but it's still inadequate. You have got to call him a fascist and a Nazi. You know, people who take the more polite approach can go with fascist. The people who want to be more vehement or according to your mood, a Nazi. This alone is historically correct and effective. And it's necessary. I have to say, if you don't call him a fascist and a Nazi, you're lying to the American people. You cannot do this. I don't care what he cares. I'm talking about voters. I'm talking about stopping this guy with tens of millions and hundreds of millions, if possible, of votes. And this also implies a certain approach to social conventions. You cannot sit down in a kind of a salon-like atmosphere and have a discussion with a Nazi fascist about what Trump's latest outburst has been. In other words, a fascist, when you see them, they have to be ostracized. They have to be shunned. They have to be shamed. They have to be insulted. They have to be confronted with the moral depravity of what they're doing, and that this is unacceptable. It is profoundly anti-American. I have to make the point. This is the most anti-fascist country in the world, in spite of everything. What's the most anti-fascist country? Russia? I'm sorry, Russia not. There was something called the Hitler-Stalin Pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, that was a military alliance between the Soviet Union and Hitler. We never did this. We never became fascist ourselves, nor did we appease fascism, like Britain and France, and we never became fascist. So be proud of your American tradition and fight Trump, because this is the anti-fascist country. Now look, Bernie, you've got to take responsibility for fighting Bernie. You have to expose Trump. If you leave this to Hillary, you see what Hillary comes up with? That he's a loose cannon. Oh my God, a loose cannon. This is pathetic. This is weak. You got to go with what I say. Nazi, fascist. Trump is a fascist. If you try to engage Trump on issues, that is a fool's errand, because he is on every side of every issue within the space of a week. You're going to look like an idiot. You're going to give him legitimacy, and he will win. And I don't want to see that. That could be Civil War or World War III, because he's a psychopath, as I'm going to show.
And this is not something you can dodge. Donald Trump, smack in the center of another controversy. This time, abortion. At a town hall with MSNBC's Chris Matthews, the frontrunner stating that women who get abortions should face, quote, some form of punishment if the procedure would be outlawed. Do you believe believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years,
I don't
what?
know. That I don't know. That
Well, why
I don't
not?
know. I don't know.
You take
because
positions and everything else.
I do take positions and everything else. It's a very complicated position.
How do you ban abortion without some kind of sanction? Then you get into that very tricky question of a sanction. A fine on human life, which you call murder.
It'll have to be determined.
A fine?
It'll
imprisonment for a young woman who finds herself pregnant?
It will have to be determined.
What about the guy that gets her pregnant? Is he responsible under the law for these abortions? Or is he not responsible for an abortion decision?
It hasn't, different feelings, different people.
No.
I would say no.
The backlash? Fast, furious. Anti-abortion groups and Democratic presidential candidates all lining up to criticize the comments.
When he was asked whether women should be punished, he said yes. And that is absolutely unacceptable. It is outrageous.
To punish a woman for having an abortion is beyond comprehension.
Amid the firestorm, Trump's campaign uncharacteristically backtracking, quickly issuing this statement, attempting to clarify his remarks. Quote, "This issue is unclear and should be put back into the states for determination. Like Ronald Reagan, I am pro-life with exceptions." Within a few hours, another statement, a complete reversal of the first, saying if abortion were made illegal, quote, "the doctor or any other person performing this illegal act upon a woman would be held legally responsible, not the woman. The woman is a victim in this case, as is the life in her womb."
The Clinton strategy, she actually went on television and said, "I'm not running against Trump." Well, of course you are. You're running against Trump. Morally unfit. And I don't want one of those stubby fingers reaching out to touch the nuclear button. If you try to pretend to be above the fray, then you will lose. The guy is mentally unstable, erratic. So look, what are we talking about? Fascism, Nazism. Nazism means more or less the same thing, but applied with Teutonic rigor and relentless, implacable strength. It is a terrorist dictatorship. In other words, the policies are reactionary, but the means are terroristic. Gangs, beatings, goons, assassinations, stormtroopers, or storm-trumpers, as we say. Storm-trumpers. It is mediated through a violent, irrationalist mass movement of fanatics, right? The Trump voter, led by a charismatic demagogue mob orator with a personality cult. In other words, the issues come and go. The only thing that remains is the personality cult. Some of the issues are real. Yes, the free trade sellouts are real. Unemployment, despair, these are real. Hitler had real issues. Was the Treaty of Versailles unfair to Germany? Yes. Was the system of reparations unfair? Yes. But when you're looking for somebody who wants to have political power, you're not dealing with a catalog of issues. You're dealing with a will. There's a person there who's going to do things. And this is what you have to watch out for. It's also important, people have said to us, how many Jews has Trump killed? Well, in 1929, Hitler had not particularly killed any Jews at all. He did that later. So you've got to separate the early phase of fascism and Nazism, when it is contending for power, and that would be, say, Mussolini 1921, Hitler 1929 or 30, or Trump today. Compare those, and then compare the latter phases when it's already been consolidated into a totalitarian dictatorship. In other words, you want to compare the early Trump with the early Mussolini and the early Hitler. You can't compare Trump today to Hitler in the bunker at the end, right? You got to compare apples to apples, not oranges. Remember also, in the past decade under George W. Bush, lots of people said he was a fascist. He was not, because he didn't have a mass movement. He didn't have a violent mass movement of stormtroopers. Fascism comes on the scene under left cover. Mussolini was what? A socialist. He was such a socialist that Lenin had praised him. It comes with left cover, radical cover, anti-establishment cover. It is a hooligan movement of protest against the existing establishment. Most of the U.S. descriptions lose this totally. So look, we have to go through a 10-point catalog of how Trump fulfills the fascist minimum. In other words, Trump has, of these 10 points, or 11 depending, Trump has enough of them, I think he's got all of them, frankly, to make a conclusive diagnosis on Trump. So I want you to have these, right? People go in the streets. As I say, the main point is political violence, beatings, gangs, militia, private security, Ku Klux Klan, Stormfront, white supremacists, savage, loving Cloven Bundy, the Lions Guard. Have you heard of that one? Trump has a personal militia like the SS called the Lions Guard. Bikers for Trump. So violence incited in public, a presidential candidate who incites violence at his own rallies from the podium in full view of the TV cameras. Squadristi and Sturmabteilungen. He does not recognize the U.S. Constitution, right? There used to be these distinctions. Are you a constitutional party? Like in the Weimar Republic, right? Germany in the 20s, the communists were not constitutional, but the Social Democrats were. So with Trump, does he generally recognize the U.S. Constitution? No. No. He wants to violate the General Welfare Clause of the preamble. And these amendments, the first, He wants to stifle, to strangle your right of free speech by increasing the power of the libel laws. Go to a British system. You know, the British system is if I'm a little writer and I write something, Trump doesn't like it, I have to prove that it's true. Otherwise, I pay everything. His damages, his court costs, and everything. He can destroy me. He can reach over and squash me like an ant with the kind of stuff he wants to do. How about the Fifth Amendment? He says illegals will not get due process. Hey, wait a minute. How do you know they're illegal if there's no due process? What are you going to do? Say your color is not right? Right? Obviously so. So no due process for illegals means no Fifth Amendment. And the 14th. Birthright citizenship, right? Think of the Union dead. All those people who died in the Civil War to get those amendments passed. And Trump wants to come along and get rid of it because he's decided to build a career on bigotry. All right, austerity. We heard it before. Excellent presentation. Wages are too high. No increase in the minimum wage. Is the minimum wage legal? He doubts it. Mussolini cut pay 65% before World War II. Hitler cut pay by 30% from the Depression lows to the eve of the war. Okay? So one thing about fascism is austerity. Fabulous rewards for the wealthy and for billionaires. The top federal income tax rate cut goes from almost 40% to 25%. My figure is minus 15% for the super rich. The estate tax is abolished. Hey, when Mussolini came to power in October 1922, the first thing the fascist government did was abolish the estate tax. Trump wants tax breaks for those who illegally stashed 2 trillion, or maybe it's 3 trillion, of profits overseas. So reward tax evaders, says Trump. They can't bring it back. We've got to help them bring it back. What does that mean, help them bring it back? Give them a tax break because they evaded U.S. taxes. Union organizing becomes impossible. Every state will be a right-to-work state. Hey, I thought you guys were for states' rights. Not when it comes to union busting. There we have to have everything uniform. The personality cult of the charismatic leader. The man on horseback, the Caesarist, the strong man, ignores Congress. The triumph of the will. That's more than a movie by Hitler. That's Trump's solution to everything. If you say to Trump, how are you going to make the Mexicans build the wall? Essentially, is with the power of my personality, with my magnetism, and with the power of my will, we'll have the triumph of the will. Well, just don't go into the steppes of Central Asia with that, right? Because you're going to fare poorly. Notice also irrationalism. He says, I have a feeling, unchecked intuition, contempt for reason, mythology, legends. With the Nazis, it was think with your blood. Don't use your brain, use your blood. I have a feeling. So he's winning. That's when he came out and said it. He said, I have a feeling I'm going to win Wisconsin, and he didn't. He lost it. Okay, let's start with scapegoating the weaker ethnic and religious groups. Jews then, Hispanics, Muslims now. Scapegoat them for the crimes of the financier oligarchs, of Wall Street, as we call them, and blame foreign nations for the crimes of Wall Street too. Notice also, there is no attack on Wall Street with Trump. The main target are what we would call bourgeois democratic politicians. They're stupid, corrupt, degenerate failures. He has contempt for elections, unless he wins them. Parliamentary procedure, no good, bad. Second grade level of vocabulary and the rest. The bankers are spared. The fascist idea of revolution means the fascists take over the government, but not the banks and the corporations. So Trump is hitting on all cylinders. Then we have the demagogic promises to restore a mythical past greatness. Mussolini cited the Roman Empire. Hitler promised the glories of Charlemagne and of Bismarck to avenge the so-called November 1918 stab in the back. Now, the stab in the back was the German army was not defeated, but it was betrayed by politicians in Berlin. Jews, liberals, communists, whatever. In the case of Trump, he says, there were Muslims in New Jersey stabbing us in the back on 9/11. And these are both fantastic lies. Both Hitler and Mussolini promised to make their nations great again. They alternated with appeals to despair and pessimism. And there's also a cult of veterans. That some of the veterans are the most meritorious people in the society. Important, the hatred, contempt, degradation of women, misogyny. Trump is essentially a pimp He's a pimp, and his brothels are called beauty contests. Miss America, Miss Universe. He's the owner and pimp of beauty contests, and he pimps out the contestants to his rich friends so that he will always be in demand. Say, oh, let's have a party. Call Sleazy Don. Don, bring over a couple of dozen of your beauty contest contestants.
I tend to like beautiful women more than unattractive women. I don't know, maybe that makes me bad.
So you treat women with respect?
I can't say that either.
All right, good, all right.
Mr. Trump, one of the things people love about you is you speak your mind and you don't use a politician's filter. However, that is not without its downsides, in particular when it comes to women. You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
For the record, it was well beyond Rosie O'Donnell.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Your Twitter account has several disparaging comments about women's looks. You once told a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice it would be a pretty picture to see her on her knees. Does that sound to you like the temperament of a man we should elect as president? And how will you answer the charge from Hillary Clinton, who is likely to be the Democratic nominee, that you are part of the war on women?
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. I've been challenged by so many people, and I don't frankly have time for total political correctness. And to be honest with you, this country doesn't have time either. This country is in big trouble. We don't win anymore. We lose to China. We lose to Mexico, both in trade and at the border. We lose to everybody. And frankly, what I say, and oftentimes it's fun, it's kidding, we have a good time, what I say is what I say. And honestly, Megyn, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me, but I wouldn't do that. But you know what? We need strength, we need energy, we need quickness, and we need brain in this country to turn it around. That I can tell you right now.
Talk about Megyn Kelly, because you brought her up. She did push you, pushed a lot of people, but what is it with you and Megyn Kelly?
Well, I just don't respect her as a journalist. I have no respect for her. I don't think she's very good. I think she's highly overrated. But when I came out there, what am I doing? I'm not getting paid for this. I go out there, and they start saying, "Lift up arm if you're going to." And I didn't know there'd be 24 million people. I figured, but I knew it was going to be a big crowd because I get big crowds. I get ratings. They call me the ratings machine. So I have, she gets out and she starts asking me all sorts of ridiculous questions. And, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever. But she was, in my opinion, she was off base.
How about this? The New York Times. It's 1927, and there's a Ku Klux Klan riot in Queens. Who's involved? Trump's father, arrested and hauled in to the station house. Notice there were also fascisti going on in the Bronx. Now, we've done all 10 aspects of fascism, and Trump has qualified. I hope you'll agree on every one. In addition to these policy points or structural features of their movements, Mussolini and Hitler were megalomaniacs. They had delusions of grandeur. You have to know the sort of canonical succession of these megalomaniacs. The Emperor Nero was one. He seemed to be a perfectly fine young man until he got total state power, at which point he began killing all the people around him, including his mother, his teacher, and so on down the line. Napoleon is another. Hitler, of course, is another. And you notice they follow their intuition as long as it's working well. But at a certain point, it doesn't work well because it is untested and unverified and unvetted. So Mussolini and Hitler are megalomaniacs. How about Trump? What I'm going to try to do now, and I hope you'll stay with me, we have identified 10 mental disorders, 10 brain maladies, if you want, 10 examples of psychopathology that Trump exhibits. And I'm putting this out here because it's time for somebody like Dr. Justin Frank or somebody to come forward. My PhD is in history, so I'm on firm ground. I mean, I can tell you where megalomania leads when you've taken power. It was if you give a supreme ruler megalomania, then that's an explosive, very dangerous combination. But I'm also looking for psychologists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, and others, professionals in that field, so that they could add the force of their credentials to the kind of stuff that I can see, and thereby make a package that's going to have more effect. Now, in the course of this, we come up against Jewish friends who say that this somehow, that Hitler and the Nazis have to be treated as unique, right, sui generis. And we would say, no, the history of National Socialism cannot be a taboo. Despite all the deaths of the Holocaust, Nazism was, after all, not unique. And I say, having lived in Germany, no Germans, the entire world has a great deal to learn from the German tragedy of 1933 to 45, and indeed from Italy, 1922 to 43, because I've lived there too and know the language and the people. When you say never again, it really ought to mean never again genocide, never again fascism. Or as we put it in the streets, no Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA. How about that one? Fascism is with us, and in America, with nuclear weapons, there is no greater catastrophe on the horizon than those stubby little fingers on the nuclear button. Now, here are some deadly fallacies. A lot of people believe this stuff and they died. They paid with their lives. So you pay attention because you can make something out of their sacrifice. Some people say, oh, he's just a demagogue. He doesn't mean it. Oh, it's so crazy. Imagine we had in the previous speech, Mein Kampf, not only Mein Kampf, but Hitler actually had a second book, Das zweite Buch, zweites Buch. He wrote a second book. That's all he ever called it. He tells you pretty much what he's going to do. And people could have taken that seriously, but they don't. They're cynical, they're blasé, they think they know. I'm so sophisticated, I can't believe that Trump will really do those things. That's a terrible mistake. A lot of people died. Other people would say, we can control him through his advisors. This was the view of von Papen. Von Papen had been one chancellor before Hitler, and von Papen thought he could control Hitler. Von Papen was lucky to get away with his life when Hitler sent a hit squad to kill him. And they killed his secretary, but von Papen got away and he became ambassador. He tried to get out of the country. There's this other guy, Hugenberg. Hugenberg is the head of Krupp, the biggest arms manufacturer perhaps in the world at that time. And he said, oh, we can use Hitler. We'll surround him with advisors, as von Papen thought, or we'll just influence him. We'll use Hitler as our tool. And this guy ended up practically with, he had a seat in the parliament, and that was all he had. Then another, the ultra-left version, the actress Susan Sarandon said, if Trump wins, then we'll really have the revolution. I'm sorry. I think that's a lot of baloney. You're not going to have any revolution. You haven't had it so far, and you won't have it when Trump is sending in his riot squads. Now, we also have our methodology, right? The basic idea is presidential candidates are not allowed to have secrets. They want control over the thermonuclear button. That means no secrets, no privacy. I don't care, your dog, your girlfriend, we want to know everything. Your money, we have the right to know, absolutely everything. The distinguished reporter Ron Costa of the Washington Post was on TV the other day saying, I don't get into Trump's psychology. Well, how can you do your job? That is a terrible mistake. That's incompetent. So he's been on all sides of every issue. If you stick to issues, that is impotent and futile. His public utterances, even though they don't mean anything much about policy, they can be used as evidence in evaluating his psychopathology. So once again, my appeal goes out. Experts in the fields of psychology, psychiatry, psychoanalysis, please come forward. Help us define Trump's psychopathology to allow voters to make a reasonable choice. Now, he's obviously a troubled psychopath, many symptoms of anxiety and stress, very short attention span, incoherent language, I think it's called aphasia in his case, unreliable judgment, posturing, erratic, policy shifts, flip-flops, outbursts of anger, incitement of violence, profane and obscene language. Quite a specimen, wouldn't you say? There is a behavior pattern. It's an impulsive decision based on basically nothing. This becomes a monomania. He's got to have it. Sacrifices a lot for the monomania and then drops it. This is Corey Lewandowski. Remember when Corey Lewandowski roughed up Michelle Fields, the reporter? And they said, Trump, why don't you just fire the guy? Oh, no, I can't do that. So he keeps him for 2 weeks. Then he hires Manafort. That's his new boy toy. And he gets rid of Lewandowski, and who's now on his way out. And so this is infantilism. Now, we're going to have 10 of these hypotheses. First one, Alzheimer's disease. if you go through 5 positions on abortion in 1 week, 3 positions on H-1B visas, 3 in a day, is it that you're lying and you're conscious, or you just don't remember, right? I forgot. What was my position yesterday? I don't know. Look, the main thing is Trump's father died of Alzheimer's disease. Trump is actually older than he looks because unlike some of us, he's had the benefit of all that plastic surgery, right? That's why he's already orange, right? He's got everything working for him. Alzheimer's disease is often hereditary. The early onset kind is overwhelmingly hereditary. He may not qualify for that, but it's always got a hereditary genetic component. There is always a danger if your parent has had it. And these are the different types, the chromosomes, the APOE gene, and so forth. The early onset can start in 30s, 40s, and 50s. He may have been sliding towards this for a long time. I don't think that's the usual pattern, but it's possible. Now, the flip-flopping. 4 positions on abortion. First use of nuclear weapons all over the map. You're going to raise taxes on the rich or lower them? Because we had a good presentation, but he's gone up and down again. And then he says, I didn't mean lower it from where it is. I mean raise it from what I was going to do before. It was raise it from the place that I cut it to. So this obviously makes it all up. 3 different lines on H-1B visas. And his website all the time said he was against them. So what does that mean? This could be a sign of it, that he's not flip-flopping, but he has dementia. Now, he also seems to communicate with the spirit world. He says, how's Joe Paterno? We're going to bring that back, right? Well, the guy's dead. But then there's also the tribe of pedophiles that he left behind in the form of Sandusky. So when you say, how about that whole deal? It also means these monsters. Hannity asks, which federal agencies will you shut down? Now, it's a dangerous question, right? Governor Perry couldn't remember. And he said, whoops, and that was the end of Governor Perry. In this case, he says, the Department of Environmental. Is that Queen's dialect? I don't know. I would know it if it were. He also thought that 9/11 had happened on 7/11. He got rid of he should have taken lessons from Giuliani, right? And here we have, this was a headline in one of the papers. He changed his line 3 times in 1 day. I've also heard that there's one where he changes his line 3 times within a 30-minute interview. So that can be getting bad for him. How about this one? The Washington Post editorial board. So they ask him, are you going to use nuclear weapons against ISIS, right? Destroy Raqqa. I don't want to start the process of nuclear. Remember the one thing that everybody has said, I'm a counterpuncher. Rubio hit me, Bush hit me when I said low energy. He's a low energy individual. He hit me first. So yes, are you going to use nuclear weapons? He hit me first. He spent $18 million worth of negative ads on me. That's putting So the Washington Post says, what about ISIS? You're supposed to be telling us, would you use a tactical nuclear weapon? And now this is a wonderful moment. I'll tell you one thing. This is a very good-looking group of people here. Could I just go around so I know who the hell I'm talking to? For the connoisseurs. You may remember the vice presidential debate of 1992 with Admiral James Stockdale, vice presidential candidate for Ross Perot. At a certain point in this thing, he said, where am I? Why am I here? And everybody said, well, of course, he's senile. Well, senility is the same as dementia. Dementia and senility. According to the Alzheimer's Association, if 2 of the following are impaired, you should seek medical help right away. So memory, communication and language, ability to focus and pay attention, reasoning and judgment, and visual perception. I think Trump loses on all counts. He better go to a doctor. Also, difficulty remembering newly learned information, disorientation. Maybe you can't figure out the delegate assignment process going on in Colorado or something. Mood and behavioral changes. Deepening confusion about events, times, and places. I think this has been a staple from the beginning. Unfounded suspicions about family, friends, and professional caregivers. Serious memory loss. Behavioral changes. Is that what you want in the White House? I, for one, do not. This is the ugly American. This is the enraged face of a degenerate ruling class. And he's not an alternative to them. He is them.
Fifth Avenue on a day so hot the pavements are melting. I'm on my way to see an iconic American. The man is a towering ego, presiding over his business empire from a tower where you literally cannot avoid bumping into his name. I read somewhere that you don't like shaking people's hands because you're afraid of germs.
Well, not afraid of germs, Matt. I don't think it's a great custom. It's been proven, as you know, a person has a cold, a horrible cold, and they shake your hand. All of a sudden, 2 days later, you have a cold. You say, I wonder how that happened. It's not a great thing, but I do it.
Which is good, because if you want to run for president, as you might well do, then shaking hands is kind of part of the job, isn't it? So if I shook your hand again, no fear?
No fear. No, it's not a fear.
You withdrew that very quickly, though. That was a quick withdrawal.
It's not a fear thing. But as you know, science has proven me right.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You were flirting with the presidential campaign in the year 2000, and then again in 2011. Why did you bottle out?
Well, not so much in 2000. I did look at it recently, prior to the last election. I had tremendous poll numbers and still have tremendous poll numbers. I thought that maybe Mitt Romney would win. He didn't do so well. He didn't resonate. He's a nice man, a fine man, but he didn't resonate. And it was a little bit of a tough thing for me. I really would have loved to have thought about running.
But I wonder whether someone like you is actually ill-equipped for politics, because having run stuff, having been in charge, having been able to say, you're fired, you can't deal with the kind of grubby compromises that politics demand.
Well, and you may be right. I mean, to be honest with you, you may be right. And then again, you may be very wrong. I mean, I see the way some politicians run things, and it's horrible.
But what makes you think that you can do a better job, especially when you seem to have quite a thin skin? You get very upset when people make fun of you.
Well, no, I don't get upset.
Donald Trump is here tonight.
The White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2011. Donald Trump had fought a bitter campaign demanding to see the president's birth certificate because he doubted that he'd been born in the US and thus even qualified for running the country. That night, the president got his own back.
No one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing?
I was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2011 when you were the butt of President Obama's jokes, and it was very funny, but you weren't laughing. You were sitting there scowling. You couldn't take the joke.
Okay, no, you're wrong about that. I loved it. I absolutely
didn't look like it.
You're wrong.
I was watching you.
Excuse me, I had 5,000. Well, I didn't know how to act. Do I smile? Do I laugh? What am I supposed to do? I had every camera in the world on me at the time. And I said to my wife, I tapped her on the knee and I said, do you believe it? This entire speech is about me. I can't believe it. I loved it.
Free publicity.
I loved it. I actually loved it. So
you're an egomaniac.
Perhaps that's a bigger problem. Okay, that could be a problem.
So why not grasp the nettle, Donald Trump, and announce in this interview that you will run for the White House in 2016?
Well, that would make a lot of people happy, I can tell you, and probably some people not so happy.
Donald Trump, may I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much.
You take care of yourself.
So President Trump sounds far-fetched, but there's one rule I've learned covering America. Never say never, ever.
As they might have said in Game of Thrones, you know nothing, Matt Fry. My goodness, that was some encounter.
We can go to our second Trump hypothesis, the obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Trump says this is what he has. Now, this is a very important moment. Trump says, I have borderline obsessive-compulsive disorder. He has said this in public. I haven't quite found the quote, but I've found it in enough of the world press so that I think it's true. Now, that's a serious matter. It means that he has seen a psychiatrist. You know what we want? We want those records. No, we do. This is the important thing. This is what I accomplished for the American people in 1988, me alone, or me with some friends, was to make Dukakis reveal his mental health records. And now we should do this again, because with Trump, it's much worse. So he has been to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist has told him borderline OCD. We want those records. We want to know all details. And we also wonder, is that a limited hangout? Like if I have Alzheimer's, maybe I can't hide that I've got something wrong with me, but I could say, oh, it's just borderline OCD, right? You know how it is. Us billionaires, right? We'll see Howard Hughes in just a minute. 1% of young people, 1%, this is in Britain, 1% of US adults have it. It runs in families. Lots of celebrities talk about it. And of course, here we're going by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, which is the authoritative source. So he says he has borderline obsessive compulsive disorder. He's afraid of germs. He's obsessive. if you go up and say, "Hi, Don, how you doing?" It's like you have a joy buzzer. He will not shake hands. Now, he's learned how to do it. This is a little bit older, 2011. This was when he first came out with the Obama birth certificate stuff. He has this obsessive-compulsive disorder. He will not shake hands, and especially if you're a teacher. Do we have any teachers? You're a teacher? You're one of the dirtiest people, according to Trump. He says teachers have 17,000 germs per square inch on their desks. Now, this is already a lunatic statement, because if they're germs, there's certainly a lot more than that, wouldn't you think? I would. 17,000 germs per square inch, and he says once he's in the building, he can't get out, because he doesn't want to touch the ground floor button, because he says that's the one they all touch. I can't touch it. He can go up to the top, but he can't go down. So this is, in other words, when you talk about escalation under LBJ, right? This is escalation that will not end. Orderliness, neatness, strictly delineated separation. In other words, you ever see the picture with the German professor and he puts the pencil down? It's got to be exactly perpendicular. The baby wants the corn to be separate from the peas at all costs. Can't mix them up. Closets. White clothes in one side of the closet, dark clothes in the other side of the closet. That's Trump. Counting. Everything's counting. And then he's got these other things which are kind of counting substitutes, like the famous BB Bong Bong. He says, I gave him the money, and BB Bong Bong, I got the building permit that I needed. Obsessed by perceived snubs or insults. Endless pondering, rumination, and review. In other words, if you like an elephant, right? He'll never forget, or maybe he will forget once the Alzheimer's takes over. Now, Howard Hughes, remember him? Here's another billionaire. He had obsessive-compulsive disorder, severe mood swings, the stuff with the order and the categories, the peas and the corn. He was obsessed with the size of peas and had a special fork to sort them by size. And you remember some of these kids, remember there were the plates that had the little raised division, so they'd be like in a third, right? So you can imagine the White House, the state dinner in the White House. It's got the plates brought out. Oh, here's another one. Jane Russell was sort of the equivalent of Marilyn Monroe. She was like the brunette Marilyn Monroe. He had a picture, and he said that it was a bunch of fabric bunched up along a seam that gave the appearances of 2 nipples on each breast. So he's obsessed with counting, right? How many nipples? And his diet was exclusively chicken, chocolate, and milk, right? So white or black. We have had some reports that Trump still has a very limited diet. I think there may be some propaganda going on, because they try to say that he'll eat anything now, but I think that they're trying to bury that story. He doesn't want to shake your hand, but if he does, then he's going to reach out and then grab you, and you can see this is Romney getting pulled in. It's called the pull-in. You see? He grabs you over there. I don't know what he's doing. He's wiping the back of the other guy's hand on his shirt? I don't know what that is. There's something wrong with this guy. The world knows, huh? The world knows. The London Daily Mail. He says, shaking hands is one of the curses of American society. I have to thoroughly wash my hands, which I do as much as possible. The teachers have 10 times the germ rate of other professions. So we want to see these reports. Trump hypothesis number 3, narcissism and megalomania. When he was in his secondary school out there in Jamaica Estates, he punched a teacher, gave him a black eye. He was then sent away to military school at New York Military Academy, grades 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, brutally beaten by coaches, okay? Hazed. This is like Eton and Harrow. Freud writes, narcissists, people of this type, impress others as being powerful personalities. A good hypothesis, full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. Grandiosity is practically his middle name. The need for admiration, the lack of empathy, right? Doesn't care about you, likes it better if you're suffering. That is Heinz Kohut. This is called the psychoanalysis of self. And of course, everything he does, the only constant, the only invariant is the personality cult. That everything, Trump has to be written. I mean, not even Stalin put his name on so many buildings, right? Stalin tended not to do that, at least in that form. I would recommend this study, Culture of Narcissism. Christopher Lasch died some years ago, but this is his book, In an Age of Diminishing Expectations. So the problem here is if Trump is a full-blown narcissist, the danger then emerges of a kind of a resonance or a dialectical process of mutual stimulation between his followers. His followers admire Trump's ability to act out a narcissistic, sadistic fantasy on a grandiose scale and with impunity. Trump gets away with being a wild narcissist, and they see that as something they want, they identify. Is this a dialectic of resonance between the mental illness of the candidate and the latent mental problems of his supporters? And if that is the case, this looks very grim, because then we'd have essentially the parties would divide into the schizophrenic party, the paranoid party, the histrionic syndrome party. This is very, very grim. And see, with Alzheimer's, something like Alzheimer's, there's not going to be a whole lot of resonance about Alzheimer's, but with narcissism, there can be. In other words, you could have a powerful narcissistic movement. Maybe that's what we've seen to some degree with Hitler and the rest of them. Now, the idea here is with Lasch. This has always interested me. I've given talks about the inner directed personality and the other directed, right? The inner directed personality is the stern person with a gyroscope inside, right? I know where I'm going. My parents wound me up. I know my duty. I know my responsibility. The other directed is looking for signals. They've got antenna, and they want to see the shifting opinions of shifting peer groups. So the other directed is the modern or inferior one. In Freud's time, mental disorders were things like hysteria and obsession. They often involved greed for money or repressed sexuality. So in those days, we had the values of the superego, self-restraint. Today, rather, the diffuse character disorders, schizophrenia, pre-schizophrenia, and borderline disorders. So today, the society is infected with the values of the id, not the values of the superego, conscience, duty, but the id, gratification, impulses, self-indulgence. So what Lasch is saying, you remember, it starts with David Reisman about 1950, and the book is called The Lonely Crowd. So what Lasch is writing is that as we've gone from the inner directed to the other directed, the schlemiel, in other words, the conformist, the weakling, that we've also got this shift in the typical forms of psychopathology. And again, this narcissistic one scares me a lot because it looks like it could actually be this dialectic between the candidate and the base. Now, Father Trump, right? What kind of superego will our little Donald have, if he has any at all? His father tells him, be a killer, you're the king. Now, what kind of a superego is that? A superego could be serve your family, believe in God, and serve your country. That's not this. Be a killer, you're the king. So poor little Donald got no attention. His father had no time for the kids. His only time for the kids is to take them with him when he works. So he says, hey, son, I'm going to go out and do an eviction. Why don't you come along, right? Show you how to evict some people. So they could watch him. The parents are distant. They are not teaching self-discipline. His father was in trouble for embezzlement and for racism, right? Discrimination in housing. So here we have a harsh and punitive superego, which does not talk about morality, the moral law, your duty, your regard for your fellow man, the golden rule, the 10 commandments, the 2 commandments, none of that, but rather an exalted standard of fame and success. So in other words, go out there and be a winner, right? This is the main issue. Be a winner. That's what we want you to do. We don't care how. The superego and the id will punish the ego with savage ferocity if you don't win. This is why he's so afraid of losing, of being inferior. This, I think, is a real insight that Lasch has. And most concerning when we get to the thermonuclear button, this is the kind of superego, again, the harsh, punitive superego. It doesn't say you have to follow these higher ideals. It says you have to crush the competition or otherwise you'll be a disgrace to the family. This superego derives its energy to some degree from the death instinct, at least what Freud identifies as the death instinct. In other words, the alliance of superego and thanatos, death. And I can see that stubby finger creeping across towards the nuclear button. Also, the loss of ability to sublimate instinctual drives. He's got to act these things out. He has no way to say, I'll be a great practitioner of something or other, right? He has to just do the art of the deal. In other words, greed. And I think this is important. Ponder it. Okay, now, to have hatred of women means to be afraid of women. This is quite obvious. Remember Melanie Klein? She was the first of the Freudians to do any analysis of children. And what she found was a rage against the mother. By the way, I guess we should have stressed perhaps more here, and I'm sorry. With this stuff, with the narcissistic business, the absentee father is the main issue. There's no father. There's no father at home because he's working. And then when you go to the military academy, you're an adolescent boy, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's when you need a father. And there's no father. He's not there. So the absentee father. There is, with Trump, it's pretty obvious, there's a fear of actual physical impotence. And it's related to the racism. In other words, the male fear of physical impotence is connected to this fear that a played out Anglo-Saxon culture is about to fall before the advances of a hardier race. It was the hatred and fear of what? The Latinos, the Muslims, the Asians. They're more prolific. They have more sexual potency than you do. This is Trump. The narcissistic male has boundless rage against the female sex. So remember, hatred of women means fear of women. This is another important insight. Now, the Trump supporter has a lot of problems. On the psychopathological side, existence may seem futile and without purpose, emptiness and depression, self-esteem obtained by attaching oneself to a strong and admired figure. There is no internal self-discipline for these people. They can't understand. Trump comes out and says, wages are too high. Are you going to vote for that? He says, I'm going to lower taxes on the rich and raise them on you. You're going to vote for that? It's like they don't register what has just happened in front of them. So they have a chaotic and impulse-ridden character. The rage against their own parents. This is often the case, right? The lack of happy memories of childhood can lead to a rage against the parents. And, of course, promiscuous rather than repressed, right? All of these things, I think, from the narcissistic songbag apply to Trump. I would see Trump as the borderline of the frontier of neurosis and psychosis, with the grandiose conception, manipulation, ravenous for admiration and promiscuity, contemptuous of his own advisors. You know that scene in A Face in the Crowd where the guy's going down in the elevator and he's just gotten on air and saying, y'all the dumbest bunch of suckers that I ever had, and I really hold you in contempt, and then he starts going down, and that's the end of his career. The contemptuousness of the admirers, I think, is important. Inner void, plus there is a pseudo-insight. In other words, he says, they tell me I should be more presidential, but I don't want to, and I'm perfectly aware of what's going on. Of course, he's really not. And terrified of aging and, above all, death. The emptier you are in life, the more comes the animal fear of death. Now remember, as Freud said before, the magnetic appeal of the narcissist. Another person's narcissism has a great attraction for those who have renounced part of their own. We envy the narcissist for maintaining that blissful state of mind because the narcissist is totally focused on himself or herself. It's an unassailable libidinal position which we ourselves have abandoned, right? It's Trump. So grandiose, lust for power, devaluing others. That's always important, right? Whatever it is, Trump has to be best. If you say, Trump, your wife is ugly, he's gonna respond. Trump, you're not as rich as you say. These are the points where you can get him. You can get his goat. You can get him going, and you can turn him into a geek act. You can make him go berserk. And I hope somebody does soon. No fixed values, restless and erratic. A traumatic childhood which has destroyed any real self-esteem, right? Because it's all bluster. Absentee father, always working. The best he could do was bring the kids along. Military school, beatings. The only values in the family are winning, winning, winning. Father embezzled money and the housing discrimination. In this Maccabee, which we had before, the gamesman, the new corporate leaders of 30 or 40 years ago, the narcissistic business executive seeks the exhilaration of gaining victories. And he argues the corporate culture promotes winning and being better. It destroys the idea of true cooperation and compassion. So once again, this is when Trump is coming on the scene. How about this one, Heinz Kohut? Narcissism comes from the lack of empathy by your own parents. By the way, with Trump's mother, I haven't been able to find out much at all about Trump's mother. There's just very little about her. She seems to be very much in the shadows, passive, hardly mentioned. We would hope to find out more. So, an irrational overestimation of the self or irrational feelings of inferiority relies on others to regulate self-esteem and a sense of value. Such people behave with outward sense of entitlement and superiority. They are dismissive of others. They have to be. They're disdainful and patronizing. Behind these attitudes are low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy. And that's the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda talking.
Well, the mechanics of campaigning, Ed, first of all, there's real question about how much money he's going to have, how reliant he'll be on the party, meaning the Republican National Committee, when from a policy point of view, they don't seem to be in sync. And I keep coming back to a very fundamental point. After a primary, you become the nominee. You have to get into the game of addition. You cannot just rely on the base. You have to broaden out from that. I don't see any signs of addition here unless there are all these more white men who come onto the scene in the fall.
It's subtraction right now. It's not even not addition. He's been subtracting the last couple of weeks. I mean, look,
well, we don't really. I mean, I'll be interested to see the polls in the next few days. Yeah,
yet settled that, but I suspect I'm right. It's subtraction. Look, we've got a couple of big names like Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets. We've got a hedge fund guy, Anthony Scaramucci, and two or three others who have said they're with him. But there's a lot of money out there that's if not on strike, is giving the minimum. And he shows no signs. I mean, his campaign talks about, oh, look, we get all this earned media. Got $2 billion, according to the New York Times, so far in free media because of Trump's, ratings factor. This is a very, very rash calculation to make that it's going to work in the general, what's worked for him in the primaries. And I see very, very few signs that, he's getting the organizational capacity and the managerial chain of command you need to run what is essentially a small corporation to get out the vote and to have people on the ground. And there is still time for him to do that. But I think, one of the basic essential things he has to do is to coordinate with the RNC, is to make life easy for Paul Ryan, not difficult for Paul Ryan, and so on. And unless he somehow gets the better of his own instincts, which, as Amy said, is very people are speculating about whether he has narcissistic personality disorder. Psychologists are not allowed to diagnose people they don't treat. And if they do treat them, they're bound by confidentiality. So journalists, of course, have been stepping into the breach.
We're so good that way.
David Brooks, to name one. But he does show signs of, and I say this as a complete amateur, of psychological waywardness, inability to take objective advice, a complete lack of empathy for others. Some of the sort of classic traits of narcissistic personality disorder.
He said it again.
I said it again.
All the while, Speaker Ryan, while debating the psychology of the nominee, is out there pressing forward with an agenda.
But let's focus first of all on the psychotic fascist, or if you will, the fascist psychotic. That's the choice, right? You don't have to call him a psychotic fascist. You can call him a fascist psychotic. And who are we talking about? Of course, the Orange Man, Don of Orange, and that's Donald Trump. Remember, the essence of psychosis in particular is repetition. Creativity, the free faculty of creativity with the preconscious working, that creates new things. But if you're stuck in the area of extreme neurosis or psychosis, then it's just repetitive. And this is what applies to Trump. But now let's also look at another participant in this discussion. He's mentioned today by Edward Luce of the Financial Times. Now, this is David Brooks. David Brooks, liberal Republican at the New York Times. The idea here is you can't be friends with Donald Trump. He's not a team player. You can't be on the team with Donald Trump. Donald Trump will never join your team because he is always marching to the tune of his internal psychosis, I would say, whatever one, his psychopathology on the inside. So let's listen to David Brooks here. He wants to warn the Republicans, you can't unify around Donald Trump for the same reason you can't unify around a tornado on the ground, right? He has to undermine and negate cooperation, reciprocity, solidarity, stability, unity. He is a lone wolf. He's a solitary figure, a disloyal diva, incapable of horizontal relationships. I don't know. I think he's had quite a few, maybe too many horizontal relationships, but you get the idea. Anybody who tried to be nice to him, from Christie to Ryan, he has kicked them in the teeth. That's his thanks. Some conservatives believe they can educate, convert, or civilize Trump. That's what von Papen thought about Hitler. That's what Hugenberg thought about Hitler. That's what von Schleicher talked about Hitler. And of those, one dead, one narrowly escaped death, and another one essentially, a dead soul. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. It is June 10th. 2016, as we're recording right now, the most malignant, right, aggressive, militant form of evil is, of course, fascism, and that's Trump. In order to be a fascist, you have to have a mass movement with violent tendencies. Who has that? There's only one who has that. It's Trump. Don't tell me about these other candidates. They don't have fascist mass movements. Mrs. Clinton is a laughingstock. She can't fill a room with 100 people. No fascist movement. No mass movement of any kind there. But Trump, oh, well, Trump certainly can. Back to David Brooks. The man who has just crushed those conservatives is in no mood to submit to them. Furthermore, Trump's personality is pathological. It is driven by deep inner compulsions that defy friendly advice, political interest, and common sense. It's obvious that Brooks is doing what I urged such people to do. Consult with professionals. If they want to be anonymous, let them be. But get this analysis out there where the public can see it. Back to David Brooks again. It is useful to go back and read the Trump profiles in Vanity Fair and other publications from the 80s and 90s. He has always behaved exactly as he does now. The constant flow of insults, the endless bragging, the casual cruelty, the need to destroy allies and hug the spotlight. Quote, Donald was the child who would throw the cake at birthday parties, his brother Robert once said. Psychologists are not supposed to diagnose candidates from afar. I would say they have to. The national emergency overrides that formalism, which is impotent. There is a well-developed literature on narcissism that tracks with what we have seen of Trump. One theory of narcissism says that it comes from a developmental disorder called alexithymia. Alexithymia, here's a new word, people. Alexithymia. Alexithymia, meaning essentially no words for emotions, right? So it is the inability to identify one's own feelings. So the inability to identify and describe emotions in one's self, in the self. Sufferers of this have no inner voice to understand their own feelings and to reflect honestly on their own actions. Unable to know themselves, the person afflicted with alexithymia, they cannot truly love themselves. They can't have any normal, healthy self-esteem, which is based on, obviously, accomplishments. Do good things, get some praise, and have self-esteem. Perfectly good, necessary. These people cannot know themselves. They cannot love themselves in that sense. They can't hold themselves in high regard. They hunger for a never-ending supply of admiration from outside. They act at all times like they are performing before a crowd and cannot rest until they are in the spotlight. To make decisions, these narcissists create a rigid set of external standards, often based around admiration and contempt. Their valuing criteria are based on simple divisions, winners and losers, victory or humiliation. They're preoccupied with luxury. Everything around them has to telegraph that they're wealthy, that they're beautiful, handsome, powerful, successful. They take the usual notions of charity or social solidarity or tzedakah in Judaism, and they simply invert them. They're incapable of understanding themselves. They have no empathy for others. They don't know what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. Other people are simply suppliers of admiration, or then, when you have to devalue them, victims to be crushed as part of some dominance display. They go out daily in search of enemies to insult and friends to degrade. Trump reportedly sets members of his campaign staff against each other, right? We have that this week, that the Manafort clique, which is sitting in offices in New York and Washington, Manafort's clique, the torturers lobby, are always fighting with Corey Lewandowski and Ms. Hicks, the press staff. Each person is up one day, down another, always wondering whether they'll be in favor, out of favor. The National Public Radio audience and the New York Times readers are seeing now Trump as psychopathology. This David Brooks piece is called The Unity Illusion, June 10th, today. And it means that you can't cooperate with him, even if you want to, even if you try to. He won't accept it. He's always got to devalue you. He's got to turn against you, and in public, and make you grovel, and down you go. On his staff, he's playing one clique against another. Easy. Everybody wants to know, what's my standing today? So they're waiting for the Sun King, Le Roi Soleil, Louis XIV. And that's also Trump's favorite decorating style, right? This Mar-a-Lago has got some pretty grotesque trumpery, right? Some trompe d'oeil in terms of Louis XIV, right? Louis XIV. That's going to be the court furniture. So the Sun King is deciding whether you're up or down. These various bourgeois hacks like Ryan and Mitch McConnell, even maybe more pathetic, they can try to cooperate with Trump, be loyal to Trump, but he won't be loyal to them. They have to run, says Brooks here, they have to run their own separate campaigns. Donald Trump does not share. He can't share because he's totally focused on himself, and it's a hollow ego.
Okay, now here's another one. Hypothesis number 4. We're almost at the halfway mark. Manic depressive bipolar with borderline personality disorder, BPD. This is coming from CNN, 2011. So obviously it's the alternation of the manic phase and the depressive phase. It has severe mental depression, can be mania, or if it's not that bad, hypomania, not quite full-fledged mania. The problem with this is that there are cycles. Now, we have to appeal to everybody to help us. Can we observe these cycles in Trump? Does Trump undergo manic depressive cycles? If so, at what intervals? Are there implications of the manic phase for example, if we get into a strategic or financial crisis? Has Trump had to disappear? Has he, for example, gone off the campaign trail at some point or other? And now we're up already to 5. Sadism, the sadistic personality disorder. Now, the thing about the sadistic personality disorder, as I've been able to learn, is that it joins frequently with other kinds of pathology. Like you could easily have, histrionic or manic depressive and also have sadistic. So the comorbidity is very high. Donald Trump on The Apprentice. You're fired! Sadistic, right? Enjoying the suffering of others. Delights in tormenting the weak and defenseless. The poor Latino family, the mother with young children coming across the border. And it's obvious that Trump has to compensate for the sense of inner hurt and worthlessness that he has accumulated. Directed this against undocumented immigrants, but also, will there be a nuclear weapon used at Raqqa? Is he going to kill the families of the terrorists? If he does, he's probably setting off World War III. And he urges his own goons. He says, beat him up, punch him in the face. I'm nostalgic for the time when they would all go out on stretchers. The dark triad of sadism, psychopathy, and narcissism. Nope, we didn't eventually get that, but it's relevant. Hypothesis number 6, histrionic personality disorder with infantile regression. Now, histrionic, of course, this means acting, right? Being a thespian and getting on the stage. Strong dependency issues.
Hey, so Donald, all right, I'm afraid to ask this question, but what would you do? Playboy put Ivanka on the cover of the magazine and she had not...
This is going to be an interesting answer.
He doesn't even want you to have a drink. I know him. So.
It would be really disappointing. Not really. But it would depend on what was inside the magazine.
If she posed, it would be fine. But if they put her picture on...
Yeah, but it depends on what goes inside the magazine.
Well, see, that's her gripe. That's this girl's gripe.
And
people assume there'll be nude photos.
Right, you do assume that with Playboy.
Okay,
but if there weren't, you wouldn't have an issue with it then? If they were using her to...
I don't think Ivanka would do that inside the magazine, although she does have a very nice figure. I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. You know?
Stop it! Oh, it's so weird. Stop
You know what? You are sick.
I know, isn't that terrible?
Yeah.
How
Well, you're
terrible.
known for saying
Is that
outrageous
terrible?
things, Mr. Trump.
Who are you, Woody Allen?
They sexualize their relations prematurely and pull powerful figures into their orbit. They experience more indulgence and less frustration. They need to be the center of attention, persistent sensation seekers, and primitive regressions into fantasy in the service of the pleasure principle. Does it sound like Trump at all? I think. Huh? They need reassurance to maintain their stability. They complain that they are unloved or, and get this, treated unfairly. Trump's favorite expression, I've been treated unfairly. They've got to treat me fairly, the Republicans, right? Or the state conventions didn't treat him fairly. And if you tell him no, it escalates into tantrums if anyone disagrees.
Let me play a portion of the tape for you.
Good, Harry. What's your name again? John Miller. What is your position? Well, I'm sort of handling PR because he gets so much of it.
On this tape, the person on it talks about his dating exploits, goes on about his divorce, things like that. I guess the simple question this morning, are you aware of the tape? Is it you?
No, I don't think it, I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time, and it doesn't sound like my voice at all. I have many, many people that are trying to imitate my voice, and you can imagine that. And this sounds like one of the scams, one of the many scams. It doesn't sound like me.
The Post also says this is something you did rather routinely, that you would call reporters and plant stories and say either you were John Miller or John Barron, but in fact it was actually you on the phone. Is that something you did with any regularity?
No, and it was not me on the phone. It was not me on the phone. And it doesn't sound like me on the phone, I will tell you that, and it was not me on the phone. And when was this, 25 years ago?
In the early 90s, but
wow,
yeah.
You mean you're going so low as to talk about something that took place 25 years ago about...
What's your name again? John Miller. And you work with Barron? Yes, that's correct. John Miller. Well, it's just that he really decided that he wasn't, he didn't want to make the commitment. He didn't want to make a commitment. He really thought it was too soon. He's coming out of a marriage that, and he's starting to do tremendously well financially. As you saw, he got his licenses 5-0 the other day, and totally unanimous. And he's really been working hard and doing well. And probably, as you know, there's a real estate depression in the United States, and he's probably doing as well as anybody there is. And frankly, he wants to keep it that way. And he just thought it was too soon to make any commitment to anybody. So what is going to happen with her? Is she being asked to leave, or she's going to be allowed to stay? Well, he treats everybody well, and you don't know him, but he's a... No, I have met him. Have you met him? Yes. He's a good guy, and he's not going to hurt anybody. The one article said he's going to throw around in the apartment is total nonsense. He's going to always treat her well as he treated his wife well. I mean, he paid his wife a great deal of money in a very bad period of time, and ultimately that was settled. There are those that say that was even put that way. I don't know if you've heard that, but that Trump became poor until he got his divorce, and then all of a sudden he's been doing very well. And I guess you've probably heard that too. But he treated his wife well, and he will treat Marla well. And he's somebody that has a lot of options, and frankly, he gets called by everybody. He gets called by everybody in the book in terms of women. And well, he gets called by a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, what about this Carla Bruni? How important is she right now? Is she? Well, I think it's somebody that she's beautiful. I saw her once quickly, and she's beautiful and all. But I think that he's got a whole open field, really, and a lot of the people that you write about, and you people do a great job, by the way. But a lot of the people that you write about really are. They just call actresses, people that you write about, just call to see if they can go out with them and things. And by the way, I'm sort of new here, and what is your position? Well, I'm sort of handling PR because he gets so much of it. Yeah. And frankly, I can tell you off the record, if I can I get to know you and talk a little bit off the record, I can tell you that he didn't care if he got bad PR until he got his divorce finished. So when he got a lot of bad financial stuff, he liked it because he it was good. Because he could get his divorce finished. Once his divorce is finished, if you notice, since then, he's doing well financially, and he's doing well in every other way. The licensing was 5-0, it was unanimous. And people are saying, how come all of a sudden he's doing so well? And then, I guess, Newsday, about 2 weeks ago, did a story on that. So I've sort of been put in here to handle, because I've never seen anybody get so many calls from the press. Where did you come from? I basically worked for different firms. I worked for a couple of different firms. And I'm somebody that knows, and I think somebody that he trusts and likes. So I'm going to do this a little part-time, and then with my life too.
What about this whole thing with that was blown up in the news, whether Marla wouldn't sign any sort of prenuptial? Did that have anything to do with the ending of the relationship?
No.
Was that true? Was he trying to get her to sign anything?
Well, I can tell you this. Just off the record, there's no way he gets married without a prenuptial agreement. Yeah. You understand that? Yeah. It was painful, but worked in the Ivana case because, while it was, challenged, it still ended up being upheld and worked. And frankly, she got not exactly 1 penny. She didn't get 1 penny more than what the agreement called for. So that's that. And she spent a lot of money on lawyers and a lot of money on everything. And there was a year of the circus, but they do stand up. I can tell you there was never any talk of marriage from Donald's point of view. I can also say that Marla would have liked to get married, obviously, but it was just something he didn't want to do. It was just too soon. And he, hopefully he'll maintain a good relationship with Marla.
What about
most people, but it's just too soon.
What about this Ivana thing? It says in the Newsday, Trump also told friends that when he and Ivana met last week, she indicated that she'd be interested in reconciliation.
Ivana wants to get back with Donald.
She does after saying on Barbara Walters?
What's she going to say? What's she going to say? Is she going to say when he's with somebody else and has other people lined up, is she going to say, yes, I want to get back, I want to get back? She's a pretty savvy woman. And she's not going to say, he's living with Marla, and he's got 3 other girlfriends, and she's not going to say, I really want to get back, She wants to get back. She's told it to a lot of her friends, and she's told it to him. But it's so highly unlikely. That's off the record. He left. It was his choice to leave, and he left.
He left for Marla.
He didn't leave. No, that's the biggest misconception in this whole thing, and this is the second question I asked about after the ring was, the biggest misconception is he left. He didn't leave for Marla. He really left for himself. He didn't leave for Marla. He never left for Marla. He was going to leave anyway. Marla was there, but he was going to leave anyway. Whether there was a Marla or not, he was going to leave anyway. So now he has somebody else named Carla, who's beautiful, and I guess you have something on her. I don't know if you do or not. But
no, they won't talk about her. Can you say anything about her? Who is this? She's the daughter of who?
She's a very successful model, etc., etc. But again, he didn't leave Marla for her. He just wants he does things for himself. He leaves for himself. He does things for himself. When he makes the decision, that will be a very lucky woman. But he's not going to do that until he makes the decision. When he makes the decision, he's very capable of a total commitment when he makes the decision. But he felt it's too soon. Off the record, he probably felt Marla wasn't the right one, or whatever, but he just felt it was too soon.
Number 7, multiple personality disorder by Trump. Trump is an imposter. 20 years ago, and there are tapes, he impersonated his own public relations spokesman as a non-existent person, John Miller. So he'd call up and say, "Hello, is that page 6 of the New York Post? This is John Miller. Trump is a great guy. Trump has 3 girlfriends. Trump is so rich. He'd never hurt anybody. It's not true that he's mean to Ivana. Stop publishing that stuff." Now, that's bad, but even worse is the fact that Trump today denies that it happened. He said, "No, I didn't do that." You can hear the voice. It's Trump. He denies today that the voice on tape is his own. Sorry. His father did the same thing. When his father wanted to do dirty deals, he did it under the pseudonym of Mr. Green. Mr. Green was Fred Trump. Hypothesis number 8 is mad cow disease, caused by Trump steaks. He apparently eats 3 low-grade Trump steaks per day. Have they been tainted with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or otherwise known as the Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome or Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome, rapidly progressing dementia, memory loss, personality changes, hallucinations, anxiety, depression, paranoia, and so forth, jerky movements, balance and coordination dysfunctions, and so on. You know, that's as good as any. If you're going to really eat 3 steaks a day for your whole life, and it's this lousy quality, I think that's to be taken quite seriously. How about this one? Alcoholic codependence. His brother died of alcoholism, his elder brother, Fred Jr. So we have the dysfunctional Trump family who enabled, now you say enabled, how enabled? This is the language of the critical literature in this field, which I have surveyed. The Trump family enabled the alcoholism of elder brother Fred J. Trump Jr. And here's the quote: "The alcoholic is said to suffer from the disease of addiction, whereas the family members suffer from the disease of codependence." Okay? So there's a psychological impact on him from the fact that the brother is an alcoholic. And finally, hypothesis number 10. You remember he was 4F in the draft, did not go to Vietnam. And he says, the 70s and 80s were my own personal Vietnam. And he was not dodging the machine gun bullets of the Viet Cong. He was dodging venereal disease, STDs, and HIV in his life as a playboy in Manhattan. So what we're looking at here is long-term syphilis, which can produce some of the symptoms exhibited by Trump. In other words, dementia. And you might say, look, somebody that rich, somebody that famous, right? You're telling me he didn't get a thorough checkup to find out what was wrong with him? I would just remind you that President Ronald Reagan spent 1 whole term in the White House with no colonoscopy until 1985. So it was only after Reagan had been in power for 4 years that it was discovered that he had some kind of a cancerous lesion in his bowels. Now, those are the 10. I think those are all to be taken seriously. Some of them more so than others, but I think every one of them deserves an answer, because you're talking about the future of all of us. You're talking about the thermonuclear button, for God's sake. So what does he have? The problems he has now would get worse in the White House. In other words, you give somebody power, whatever problems were there are going to be magnified. And again, the example of Roman Emperor Nero, it seems to me, is a good example. He was a fine young man until somebody gave him absolute power. So, delusions of grandeur, degeneration into paranoid schizophrenia, a downward moral spiral of crimes and atrocities, the impact of defeats, public snubs, unavoidable. Nero, Napoleon, Hitler, George W. Bush. Trump Tower becomes the bunker. Mar-a-Lago becomes Berchtesgaden, right, the retreat in the Bavarian Alps. Paranoid schizophrenia. Grandiose delusions are found in paranoid schizophrenia, in which a person has an extremely exaggerated sense of his or her significance, personality, knowledge, or authority. Well, when you get into the White House and they start kowtowing, then that makes this stuff worse. Graydon Carter, Vanity Fair, then of Spy magazine, he wrote, "Like so many bullies, Trump has skin of gossamer. Just to drive him crazy in 1988, I took to referring to him as a short-fingered vulgarian. in the pages of Spy magazine. And he says that as of November 2015, he continues to receive pictures from Trump of Trump's hands circling to show how big his hands and how long his fingers are. The Tax Wall Street Party proposes to hold an international conference in September with the title Investigating and Classifying the Psychopathology of Donald J. Trump. The other thing you can do, of course, is realize, once again, that some of his issues are real. He never talks about Wall Street guilt. Mussolini talked about the stab in the back. Mussolini, the mutilated victory. Trump talks about free trade sellouts and runaway shop. Fine. We can fix that. 15% protective tariff, $15 minimum wage, repeal the Taft-Hartley Act, go back to the Wagner Act, seize the Fed, $6.5 trillion for credit, 40 million new productive jobs. Ultimately, that's how you wipe out the potential for such a demagogue. Now, life under Trump, a reign of terror. It all comes from Nixon, strangely enough. The people around him are all Nixonian, lots of them. Roger Stone has a tattoo of Nixon on his back. Manafort the thug is from the Nixon White House. They will use the Patriot Act. They will use NSA surveillance. They will use FBI provocateurs and COINTELPRO in ways that nobody has dreamed of. And they will use libel suits to prevent anybody from reporting on these things. The October surprise. How can Trump hope to win the presidency? Well, based on the polls, he cannot. He cannot be elected. Therefore, a terrorist event, something like San Bernardino, or better yet Paris, or maybe Brussels in September, October.
Good morning, I'm Dara Brown. There's breaking news at this hour from Orlando, where there are reports of a shooting at a nightclub in that city. NBC's Sarah Dalloff is on the phone near the scene. And Sarah, good morning to you. What are you seeing in Orlando?
We're here at the intersection of Orange and Miller. We are just blocks outside of downtown, near this nightclub where the shooting supposedly happened. About 30 to 40 police cars that we can see from our vantage point here on scene. We've got a police helicopter in the sky. And what's unusual about this is usually at these scenes, it's chaotic and there's noise, there's people yelling and sirens. There's none of that here. It's very quiet, which leads us to believe that this is still an ongoing active scene here. We've been talking to some of the witnesses who described just horror inside this nightclub. One man saying he was taking a break from dancing. He's headed to the bathroom when automatic gunfire, he believes, is what he heard, rang out. He ran to the bathroom along with a crowd of people barricading themselves inside. He said it was this mix of gunshots and club music, the thumping of club music, and then all of a sudden it was just very quiet. He doesn't know how long they stayed in there, but some police officers eventually opened the door and told them to run outside. He was still looking for several of his friends. He couldn't get them to pick up the phone. Just talked to another gentleman who was helping with the wounded, taking off the bandana he was wearing on his head to use as a tourniquet on one man, helping another man walk outside, getting him to safety so he could have medical attention. Very upsetting. Understandably, the things that these people have seen, they're trying to process them out here as police continue to work out here, and this helicopter hovers above us at the scene.
And Sarah, another question. Do we know how many people are possibly involved in this? Obviously, the patrons have gotten out of the club and police sort of cleared the area. If they're looking by helicopter, do we have any indication if maybe there's somebody on the loose, or if they are focusing more on somebody that's inside the club?
I can only tell you what I see right now, and that is that the helicopter seems to be very concentrated. It's not going on the streets. It's not going up boulevards. It seems to be focused on right in the immediate area surrounding the nightclub. As far as the number of people who may be involved, that's also something we're hearing a lot of different numbers about right now. We've heard 2 or 3. We've heard 1. These are eyewitness reports from people who were inside the crowded nightclub who are still processing what they've seen. So I really hesitate to put a number on the amount of alleged attackers who may have been inside this nightclub right now.
And you said you spoke to some of the witnesses. They mentioned that people had been screaming and then they were hiding out for a while. Do we have an approximate time of when this all happened in Orlando?
This happened right around 2 a.m. local time in Orlando, is our understanding. The club, it's Saturday night here. There was an outdoor concert. People were just keeping the night going. It's a popular nightclub. It was full at the time, and the party, not winding down at 2 in the morning here in Florida. The nightclub did post on their Facebook something to the extent of, I'm not going to quote it verbatim here, but everybody get out, everybody run.
And it sounds like the police were very quickly to respond to this area. You mentioned that there had been about 30 to 40 police cars in this area. How much of the area has been cordoned off? How much of it has been sort of cleared so the police can get in there and do their job?
So we have at least a block and a half between us, where the perimeter starts on this end, and the nightclub. And so I can only assume the scene, that extends in a circle around the nightclub right now. So quite a bit of it shut down. They're urging people, it's not a lot of traffic right now, but they are urging people to kind of avoid this area. You can't get through. There's a very hard police line set up right now.
Some 300 people were inside of that nightclub when all of this happened. And again, many of them still unaccounted for. Many family and friends waiting at the hospital, which is just about 6 blocks away from where we're standing right now. And that's where we find ABC Action News' Jake Peterson to try to figure out if some of these families and their friends will be able to get some answers tonight. Jake?
Many family members and friends are here right now, some of them telling me they were actually at the club last night and they had to escape.
Out of nowhere, it was like, brrr, and I was just like, that sounds like a gunshot, so I threw myself on the floor.
Janelle Gonzalez says the shots didn't stop.
It was rapid fire. It was like, brrr, and then he'd like change, put another ammunition, brrr, and then change, put another ammunition, and I could just smell the ammo in the air, and I was like, this is a gun, this isn't fireworks, like we need to leave.
But that wasn't easy. He says Mateen was standing near the main entrance.
We start digging through the curtains, and we finally see a door, and there's probably like 50 people trying to like jump over each other and just like exit the place. Shooter keeps getting closer and closer.
They eventually find a fence to climb.
But then I ran straight to 7-Eleven. That was the most lit place that I could see. And as soon as I got to 7-Eleven, the workers were like, come, hide. And we were hiding in the freezer.
But some of his friends weren't as lucky.
I'm still missing 2 friends. Like, I have 3 friends that are inside injured with bullet wounds.
Hey guys, Dabu7, I want to share with you something that was caught live on air as the mainstream media ran a guy off the air when he was giving some of the most crucial details about the Orlando shooting that I've heard yet. And that is that there was a man inside holding the doors shut on them so people could not get out. When he says this, they lose him.
And like try to escape. And the area was very, very narrow. It was very hard to get through, but we kept on pushing and trying to get, as many people as we could to safety. However, the gunshot started. A lot of people were trampled, and there was a guy there that was trying to prevent the door, like hold the door closed so that we didn't exit. And he would.
Janelle? Now you guys can see right there. They lost him, they cut him off, and he said something very important, that there was someone inside holding the doors closed. That is pretty bombshell if you ask me. Why would anyone be doing that in an emergency situation? That would also give credence to this wasn't a one-man act, and that it's more than what meets the eye, like we said. It's always who is to gain.
The shooter, when he entered, he went straight towards the right. He never came towards the left. The left room, which is considered like the hip-hop room, that's where the majority of my friends were, and that's why we didn't get hit by any of the bullets, because we automatically hit the floor and we started like trying to find somewhere to escape. But everybody that was pretty much in the right room either got injured or kind of ran out through the other back door.
What's the right room called? What is that type of room?
I guess like the hip-hop room. They just have like a really long bar there and mirrors everywhere.
So do you think he was working with somebody else? Is that what?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it was more than one person. Like I said, I heard 2 guns going at the same time. And it was very, very, very crazy.
How long did the shooting last?
I want to say it lasted for about 8 minutes. Like, he wasn't stopping. He just kept on shooting and shooting and shooting and just walking around. Was it rapid fire? Was it single shots? No, it was rapid fire. It's like, brrr, and then he'd like change, put another ammunition, brrr, and then change, put another ammunition. And I could just smell the ammo in the air, and I was like, this is a gun. This isn't fireworks. Like, we need to leave. So in a moment of desperation, we're all crawling on the floor trying to find a place to exit. And I look to my right and I see that a lot of people are going through some curtains. So we start digging through the curtains and we finally see a door, and we try to like actually leave the door and exit the door. As we're getting out of the door, there's a very like narrow passage. It must have been like maybe this thick, and there's probably like 50 people trying to like jump over each other and just like exit the place. And there was a guy kind of holding the door, and the guy was holding the door, not letting us exit the club. And we're like, what's going on? He's like, no, you guys have to stay inside. And as he's saying that, the shooter keeps getting closer and closer, and like the sound of the bullets are getting closer and closer. So everyone starts to panic. People are getting like trampled and stuff, and like, you know, we're like, let us out. And the first thing that came to my mind is, if it's an altercation between two people, you know, like, oh, I don't like this person or whatever, then you have an automatic handgun and you just like, you know, shoot or whatever. But the fact that somebody came in there and out of nowhere, all you hear is like, brrr, brrr, I was like, this has to be some type of either hate crime, or I have no idea what it is. And then I put two and two together, and I was like, this guy's trying to prevent us from leaving the club. Maybe they're working together.
I'm gonna die here. I'm not gonna see my kids. That's all I was thinking about was my kids.
Sitting at home just outside of Orlando, Leiliana Bullaneta's cuts, bruises, and gunshot wound are still fresh.
Right here.
So are her memories of what happened. She doesn't believe the gunman acted alone. She says she believes she saw an accomplice.
He was right next to the guy. I don't know if that was, you know what I'm saying, but there was other people that they were saying that they were getting they were holding the door from the outside so they won't get out.
So you think this guy didn't act alone? There's just no way.
There's no way. He killed so many people.
I want you to be just as clear as you can about what you saw and who you saw.
I saw a white man, a white male. His face didn't look like he was scared. So, definitely was more than one shooter.
She says she told police about what she saw. The Orlando Police Department has vehemently insisted there was only one shooter, and he's dead. But there are other survivors who also say they saw something similar. Omar Mateen speaking on the phone.
It sounded as if he was communicating with other people who were involved with it. He made a statement that if the police come in, they're gonna attack, but it's okay, we got the snipers outside. Whoever he spoke to, and you know, some police officers said maybe he was just deranged, maybe he was talking to himself, but I honestly feel like I don't think he was able to pull that off all by himself.
For her part, Bullaneta also says she heard this shout from the gunman.
Yelling, Allah Kabak. I don't know how to say it, but he was yelling something.
She says she hid in the bathroom to survive.
Everybody was panicking, and I was trying to tell them to calm down, be quiet. He's gonna hear us. He's gonna come over here, and we're gonna die. I honestly thought that I was gonna die in there.
Two of the friends she was with that night were killed, Amanda Alvear and Mercedes Marisol Flores. Another friend, Brian Lopez, is in critical condition in the hospital.
I saw people in front of me get hit and down. And it's like, how are they gonna miss me?
Somebody watching out for you.
That's crazy.
We have reached out to federal law enforcement sources and local police. They reiterate that this person was the lone gunman. We know from past events that eyewitness testimony is often colored by the chaos of the moments. But for Bullaneta and others like her, they know what they saw, and they do not believe that this gunman acted alone. Nick Valencia, CNN, Orlando, Florida.
I arrived there around 11:20. Last call was at 1:45. My friend wanted to go to the bathroom in the back of the club. We went in there, you know, and I was in the stall with her in the stall. Well, she did what she did, and then we were hearing popping sounds, and then we heard it again like 5 seconds later. And
you knew it wasn't the music.
My friend told me that's the music, but it just was changing up in sound, getting louder. So he was working his way toward probably the restroom area, and then it got louder, and then me and my friend laid ourselves on the toilet bowl to prop up our feet and our heads, so if he does come in, doesn't see legs underneath there and start shooting through the stall. but he ended up, there was people he heard, knew that was in the back, and other people ran into the back, so he must have followed them, and they ended up in the back stall. There's 2 stalls there. And he started shooting, and people were screaming. And then he stopped, and then he went back out, and he was shooting out there just as well. Then he came back in, and then he heard them on the, talking probably to the police department or texting, and he asked them, please do not text. And so they stopped, but then somebody started the texting back up again, and he said, didn't I say don't text? Give me all your phones. Who's in here? Are you guys black? And a couple of them said, yeah. He said that I don't have an issue with the blacks. So it looked like his purpose was to shoot white, presumably. So he did not bother them, did not try to finish the job of shooting in that stall. And then he got on the phone, I don't know if it was with the news or the police department, telling them that to stop, America needs to stop bombing ISIS in
So he
Syria.
was calling people on the phone?
Yeah, he called somebody on the phone.
And he was telling them stop bombing ISIS?
Stop bombing ISIS on the in Syria. So then after he had finished with that, he got mad, he hung up, because they were asking him, he got just mad. And then he called somebody else that he knew, and he mentioned that that he was the 4th shooter, and there was 3 others, and he mentioned, I believe, a female name, and that was playing dead, or because he's saying that she has a bombing vest, and he has one too. And then he said there were 3 snipers out there waiting for cops to come, so the snipers would shoot at the cops.
So this whole time, what were you doing? I mean, you must have heard all this gunfire.
Yeah. I stood quiet. I said, I don't think he knew we were there until he came back in and shot again, and one black boy came crawling underneath the stall, grasping our legs and having me and my friend to drop to the floor. And then he stopped, and I just played dead. Did not move my body back. My body was between the wall of the stall and the toilet wedge, and he would go wash his hands and use the blower, and I felt something poke the back of my pocket.
You think he was poking you?
Yeah, it was like one quick touch or poke. I don't know if it was with I didn't know what he had to use as a weapon, but he probably was thinking of, I'm dead. And I was uncomfortably wedged between my shoulders up against the back wall, my forehead up against the toilet bowl, stiff there for 3 hours, uncomfortable.
So you played dead for 3 hours
yes,
straight?
And my friend followed the role, quiet, acted, we were dead.
And you believe that's what saved your life?
Yes, he did not try to kick the door or shoot the door open. He was busy fixing his rifle, or I don't know what he had, but he was busy fixing. I heard shells drop, shells dropping on the floor. And he was happy that he got it fixed, and he said, oh, I got plenty of bullets.
He said, I've got plenty of
extra bullets. And that was it. And then, when cops were getting closer and whatnot, he started shooting in the stall, and I don't know if he was killing the ones in the back stall. And we were hearing all that, and then the cops was like, screaming, the cops, and then there was an explosion. First we heard a couple of explosions in the beginning. We thought whoever he talked about that had a vest, I thought other bombs were going off on the other side of the club. And since he was the 4th shooter, I was thinking he's going to be the last one to set off his vest, if he had a vest. I didn't see it. If he had a vest, he was going to set that off, and I thought my life was going to end there.
Thought your life was
and I didn't know if the cops came in, shoot him, and hit his vest, and not knowing he has a vest. Because I text out, that we're in the Adonis section of the bathroom, let the cops know that we're here. So the cops already had him planned to figure that we were the last ones to get out. And with the explosion and everything else, and then there was another second explosion, it was another second explosion, and the cops bust a hole in the wall.
What did you see when you walked through that club?
No, I did not. They took me out of the hole in the wall.
To your friends who have lost their lives,
right. So
what do you say?
May God be with them. God bless their soul. It's hard. Every gunshot I heard, I was hoping it wouldn't hit any of my friends, but you can't prevent it. It was just constant pop, 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 like it was a fast shooting,
Eyewitness now, Louis Bourbano, is also with us right now. Louis, you were inside the club as well? Yes, George. I was inside one of the main bars in the front when you turn in at first, towards the end, cashing out around 2:05, no later than that.
So you're right there in the front of the club. Where was the shooting coming from?
The entrance was to my right. I was at the far end to the left of the bar with my best friend and a couple people we had seen and known and recognized. It came to the far right. There is I guess a crest or a crevice where the entrance happens. You have to go through there. There's a mini hallway that enters to my bar, the bar I was in, and then the main dance floor. But at that point in time, when everything was going off, we couldn't even tell where it was coming, whether it was coming towards us, towards somewhere else. It just got louder and louder. And at first we thought it was a DJ playing, adding a little gunshots, 4 shots into the set list, as many DJs do, which they should stop doing that after today for sure, is because everyone got confused. But past 4, we realized there was something different, and then it was a domino effect of people just ducking their heads left and right, screaming. I don't remember screaming. I don't even remember breathing. I just remember dragging my best friend down, dragging this girl down who was looking for her sister, and then just slipping in what was already, you can imagine, everything from drinks on the floor to blood.
So were there victims actually inside that side bar where you were, or was it all in the main dance floor?
To be honest, George, I could not tell. It started with those 4 gunshots. They got louder, they got closer. It was going on continuously, as I think Chris said. As we were, there was a break after about 10 to 20 gunshots. There was a break of like 10 seconds, which then we started jetting towards this little side exit of the side stage. And then the shooting continued continuously, loud. It was definitely no small gun, that's for sure. And then we jetted out to the back when the volume of the gunshots started getting closer and louder.
Was it like a machine gun, or was it one shot at a time?
No, it was not one shot at a time. It was not. If it was one shot at a time, I would have heard only probably 8 rounds, and that was it. And I heard at least 20 to 30 by the time I got out. By the time I had to help some kid who collapsed on the floor, and I lost my shirt, but only because I used it as a turn-again. Two of my shirts as turn-agains for this poor gentleman, who I'm praying everyone, especially him, is going to make it through, who had lost half his arm. And then this other guy who was walking around with a bullet in his leg, and he had no idea it was sticking out. And the bullet, I kid you not, was about this big, the size of your finger. And he had no clue because of the adrenaline, and he was too busy looking for, I think, a family member who was still inside.
So you stayed inside, were trying to help some of the victims before you left out. How many minutes were you inside after the shooting began?
It seemed like an hour, but no more than a minute and a half. And then we just started pushing and pushing. And as soon as we got that 10-second break, we went to this alleyway, which led for only employees. And we had tried, me and this random guy, tried blocking the door. Because at that point, like I said, the bullets were getting louder and closer. So we blocked this door, and we did hear banging. And I pray it wasn't anyone trying to escape, because I would forever feel guilty. But at that point, there was about 20 people in front of us, crammed in this little alleyway with a big hole in one of the fences, and just trying to topple over, just trying to escape, just run.
So you all kept trying to get out of there as quickly as you possibly could. But after you got out, the shooting continued?
As we got further out, it was continuing. At that point in time, that's when I had seen this gentleman collapse, and he was still really close to the building. I just picked him up and I just dragged him. I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Unbeknownst to me, his arm was in half and split, and he had a gash on his side. Dragged him as far as I could, and then an undercover cop, believe it or not, who I believe was the one who dispatched and called it in. We were just wrapping up and trying to take care of him, but at that point I didn't hear anything. Everything went numb and very fuzzy and just very distant. Just and I look back at everything. I'm looking at my clothes, and like I had lost my shirt, obviously, like I said, but you know, I have a really, really bad memory that I'm wearing right now. I haven't even gotten a chance to get a hold of myself or anything.
Well, I can only imagine what you're going through, and for you to have the presence of mind to be able to help at least some of those victims was remarkable in and of itself. You heard the gunshots, you heard the burst of gunfire. Did you ever see the gunman at all?
No, sir. And even if he were to enter the room, I was already on the floor sliding. We were just sliding on the floor at that point, trying to push. No contact, no eye contact. I didn't even want to at that point. Why would I want to give them the satisfaction of looking in their eyes, if anything? So.
But you're clear, just one gunman. You only heard the shots from the one rifle as far as you could tell.
Yeah, no, it was one gunman. It sounded like two, but then I realized that wasn't. That was just a big machine gun of some sort, or with some severe power.
And give us a sense of the scale of this club. You said about 20 people were in this alleyway after you got out of the small bar. You had the big dance floor in the middle. We've heard other reports of hostages who were being held in other parts of the club. Give us a sense of the layout here and where that might have been.
At least in the front bar, it's not that big, maybe probably 40 feet in length, probably about 20 feet wide. That was packed with over 100 people as it was. At that point, just jet out. The main dance floor was already kind of clearing out. People were going to their bars, paying off their tabs. They made an announcement, close out your checks, last call for drinks. And so it seemed like everyone was gravitating either towards the back side. Like I said, I wasn't in the main bar anymore. We had just moved to the front bar to collect our checks at around 2 o'clock. And then that's when we took the side glass door to get into the bar where we were at. And then...
And when you left, when you left the bar, where were you in relation to the bar? How far away were you, and how long did you remain on scene?
Once we left the whole club, is that what you're asking? As soon as we jet, I threw myself through that hole in the fence, ran around, helped. I was probably still around helping out 10, 15 minutes till the paramedics came. And then from there, they took over. That's when the cops said, okay, let's go. Time to go now, and just go. So we went about a block down, and then we heard the controlled explosion hours later, and then we heard 2 more explosions, and we heard 1 gunshot followed by the takedown, of course, which was at that point the officers right next to us told us duck behind the ledge, and then they moved us behind a huge fire truck. Stayed behind.
And after that takedown, which was apparently a little after 5 a.m., down there in Orlando, did you see any of the rescued hostages leave the site?
No, sir. At that point, they we were there for a little bit behind this fire truck. We heard the takedown. We waited about 30 minutes. We walked a couple blocks around, escorted by police, greeted by over 150 minimum police officers from different counties in Florida. And then little by little, hostages were coming through. One of our longtime bartenders, a good friend, was hiding in a small closet with about 8 to 10 people in a small little fitting room, closet, and they were starting to make their way. And then from there, OPD transported us to a bus in which we went to downtown to headquarters, and we had to make our statements.
Here's ABC's Tom Yamas.
In the wake of the worst mass shooting in American history, Donald Trump tweeting he is praying for all the victims and their families. But then this, appreciate the congrats for being right on radical Islamic terrorism. I don't want congrats. I want toughness and vigilance. We must be smart. That tweet setting off a firestorm. Meghan McCain telling Trump, you're congratulating yourself because 50 people are dead this morning in a horrific tragedy? Singer John Legend posting, Trump is truly an awful person. But Trump wasn't done. Later, in a statement, quote, if Hillary Clinton, after this attack, still cannot say the 2 words radical Islam, she should get out of this race for the presidency. It's a charge he's made before.
Refuses to even say the words radical Islam. Refuses to say the words. This alone makes her unfit to be president.
But Trump's words today, a sharp contrast with Clinton's, who sent out condolences in English and Spanish, saying we need to redouble our efforts to defend our country from the threats at home and abroad, and adding we need to keep guns like the ones used last night out of the hands of terrorists or other violent criminals.
We are joined this morning by Donald Trump on the phone. Mr. Trump, thank you for joining us this morning. You tweeted out yesterday we have to be tough, smart, and vigilant. What exactly are you proposing in the wake of this tragedy?
Well, one thing we have to do, George, is we have to get the people that surround these maniacs to start talking. People know when they're sickos. I mean, for the large part, like in San Bernardino with the bombs all over the apartment, people saw those bombs. Nobody reported them. In this case, we'll find out that many of his neighbors, many of the people that lived next to him knew he was, he had bad intentions, and nobody reports to the FBI or the police, and they just don't do it for whatever reason. And we have to get that, and we have to have a ban on people coming in from Syria, coming in from different parts of the world with this philosophy that is so hateful and so horrible.
But sir, let me interrupt you on that one right there. How would the ban have made a difference here? This man was a United States citizen. He was born in New York. He lived in Florida.
No, that's right. But we have many people coming in whose hate is equal to his, and just as bad, and even worse, frankly. And we have to stop people from coming in. We have no documentation. We don't know where they come from. They could be ISIS. In fact, some of them have cell phones with ISIS flags on them. We are taking in people, and it's getting worse, and we're taking in them by the thousands. And you look at Hillary Clinton, she wants to increase it by 500%. She wants more to come in as opposed to none coming in or less coming in, and that in itself is a disaster.
And one of the other things that we've learned here in the last 24 hours is that Omar Mateen was interviewed by the FBI on 3 separate times, investigated twice, yet he was able to buy a gun relatively easily. Should something be done about that?
Well, he was licensed also, though, George. And, when you talk about, like, gun control, when Obama mentioned that yesterday, it was so inappropriate because that was not the problem. The problem was we have a maniac, we have a madman. He could have used a bomb. He could have used other things just as easily, and would have been probably even more devastating.
Now let's join a press conference in progress. This is the owner of the St. Lucie Shooting Center from where the terrorist got his firearms. Let's listen in.
They did an outstanding job and have been following some of it on the news. I wish them all the best. I personally worked down at the Twin Towers. I retired in March of '02. And I was also a first responder to Flight 587, which went down in Rockaway Park. I have an idea what they're facing in this investigation, and it's horrific. So my feelings go out to those law enforcement people as well. I would like to avoid any political issues and stick to the facts regarding this case. An evil person came in here and illegally purchased 2 firearms from us. And if he hadn't purchased them from us, I'm sure he would have gotten them from another local gun store in the area. This man held multiple security licenses. He had an armed and an unarmed license. He passed the background check that every single person that purchases a firearm in the state of Florida undergoes. Let me say that again. A full background check was performed by Florida Department of Law Enforcement with their coordination, their agreement with the FBI, however they conduct their backgrounds. There is no such thing as an abbreviated background check, even though that's what's been wrongly reported. I have no information regarding where this evil person took his security classes, so I can't really discuss that with you. I can tell you and recommend you contact the Florida Department of Agriculture Division of Licensing. They're responsible for any security licenses being issued, as well as the concealed carry permit in the state of Florida. There have been a couple questions directed to me regarding whether this evil person bought body armor here. Number one, he's familiar to me, vaguely. I don't know him personally. He's been here. Obviously, he purchased 2 guns legally. I have no recollection of anybody asking for body armor, number one. Number two, we've never sold body armor, and we don't currently sell any body armor. Any other questions? I don't know what I can tell you. I just hope that you do some truthful reporting and get to the facts and stay focused at least to the incident and say your prayers for these victims. It was horrific, and we all feel that same pain.
Would it be an odd purchase for someone to come in, though, and purchase a long gun and a handgun at the same time?
They didn't buy it. Okay, I don't really want to answer questions, but he did not buy the handgun and the long gun at the same time. They're approximately a week apart.
Can you say when?
And a long gun is a background check, another note, in Florida. It's a quick background check with the credential, your driver's identification that you're a Florida resident, and as long as you clear that background check, you can leave with that long gun. A handgun, as I said earlier, is a 3-day wait. Palm Beach County is a 5-day wait. It's called a cooling off period. Fair enough. I don't know what else. I don't know anything else on this case. Unfortunately, he's evil. We happen to be the gun store he picked. And there's nothing else I can say. It's horrible.
Because a customer came here before who said that he had been to your shop.
I don't know what well, obviously he's been to the shop, and I don't want to get into too many questions and debates, but he's been here. If a customer saw him and came in here, God bless him. I've seen him. I can't tell you I know him. I'd be lying to you. He's a customer. He made a purchase, and it's horrible. I'm just sorry he picked my place. I wish he picked no place. That's society. I don't want to get into.
Do you know when he bought the guns here?
We all, huh?
Do you know when he bought the guns here, roughly? Like
it was, I believe it was a week or 10 days, something in that time span before this happened.
Do you remember if he had the cooling off period or not? Did he have a concealed weapons license? Or
No, we did not. No, we did not.
Okay, so he had to wait the cooling off.
He had. That's why you have to wait. And sometimes you do have a concealed carry permit. Even though you have it, there still has to be a background check done, regardless. And they can also deny you or give you a conditional hold and say, oh, well, there's an issue there. So, and that has nothing to do with us. We follow the rules. We don't make the rules. And I'm sorry if you're frustrated. I don't have any more answers for you.
Did he come shoot at your range on a regular basis?
No, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. We do a very big business here. Like I said, we're a security training facility. We do civilian stuff and all. And that's all I can tell you. I don't know what the exact date was. I don't know, but it was well over the 3-day period or whatever.
All right, we're going to break away from the press conference there. That's the owner of the St. Lucie Shooting Center, Ed Henson, explaining how he complied with Florida and federal law when selling firearms to the terrorist.
One thing is a law enforcement guy. Would you have liked to have known that the FBI was investigating him for terrorism?
It would have been fantastic. He wouldn't have gotten a gun.
And one of the things we've been asking the FBI today is why aren't they sharing information back and forth about past cases?
Somebody dropped the ball.
You see the back and forth in Washington about what to do about these kinds of incidents. Is there any middle ground you think they could get to?
I would love to sit with you and discuss that. Really, it's not a 2-minute discussion. And I hate the politic end of it, the whole political realm of things, okay? Everybody's blaming, pointing fingers.
Right.
We don't have a gun problem in America. We've got a radical Islamic problem. That's where we have a major problem. We've had guns for hundreds of years. And if you look up in 1990, Happy Land Social Club in the Bronx, they killed 85 people with a Molotov cocktail. They threw a firebomb in. The Murrah building was fertilizer and fuel. And it's sad. Somebody's hell-bent on destroying somebody's life or killing people. They're going to do it. But until the country addresses that, regardless of which side of politics you're on, it's never going to get cured until somebody faces it head on. And I think we're at that point now.
It's obvious to stampede voters into supporting Trump and to seem to give credibility to his specious arguments. There are clearly pro-Trump intelligence factions. In other words, what you're seeing is Wall Street dumps the Republican Party, Wall Street supports Trump, and if Wall Street makes that shift, the corresponding intelligence factions, CIA and so forth, will come along. This has been discussed by Bill Maher, Frank Luntz, Republican pollster, Tom Friedman of the New York Times on Meet the Press, WNYC Brian Lehrer, One Morning with Mark Green, and Charlie Rose with a woman who's the correspondent for the New York Times. So this is what's being talked about. October surprise, September surprise for Trump. The rage of the wounded narcissist knows no bounds. Narcissistic rage is uncontrollable, and unexpected anger resulting from narcissistic injury that threatens the narcissist's self-esteem. So some foreign leader, suppose Kim Jong-un says, "You're a jerk." Is that going to lead to World War III? Well, with an infantile specimen of this kind, it can. Now, in a certain sense, Trump is not likely to be president. During the last phase of Watergate, we had Kissinger, Haig, and Schlesinger said among themselves, if Nixon tries to nuke some country, we won't do it. If he wants to get out of Watergate with a nuclear war, we won't go along. Notice also General Hayden's warning that the armed forces will not violate the Geneva Convention by obeying illegal orders from Trump. I hope not. But you can see it's better not to get into this territory, because by the time you get into this territory, there are no good answers. Right? The only thing to do is to get out of it. And I invite you, every one of you, join us. We're the Tax Wall Street Party. My name is Webster Tarpley, tarpley.net. There's a message box on there. You can find it. Send me an email. Join us in a 6-month mobilization to stop Donald J. Trump from becoming President of the United States. We wish to preserve our institutions and secure a successful party realignment into some kind of a decent future for all of us. So thank you so much for your kind attention. Test the limits of the First Amendment all the time. The First Amendment lives through us, writers, thinkers, intellectuals, right, protesters. We've got to keep the First Amendment going, because otherwise somebody like Trump will come along and lay this libel law stuff down. So if there's no other issue involved, fighting him on the libel laws, I think, is worth it. What you need to do now is to realize that if you compare the United States today to Germany in 1933, our institutions are incredibly stronger. In other words, the Constitution has a tremendous mass base. People believe in constitutional liberties. Another good point about the U.S. is this is the land of the mass movements. We've had them. We've had abolitionism. We've had the populists. We've had the progressives, whatever they were, but we've still had them. We had labor in the 1930s. We had civil rights going on for 20 years. We had the student movement. We had the anti-war movement above all. So this is the land of the mass movements. And what we obviously need is, what I see is a revulsion against Trump. In other words, a regurgitation. Spit this out. Get rid of it. The press, obviously, $3 billion of free publicity. It seems to me there is a fighting perspective to stop him. I'm not exactly sure how. My call right now is not to plan to go to Canada or some other places. It's too boring. They don't have mass movements like we do. We have them, and we need another one soon. So I invite everybody, don't run to Canada or someplace else, unless you've got some setup that makes it very easy for you to do that. Stay here and fight this guy, because it's a culturally alien thing. I'm trying to say fascism did not pass, and there's no reason why it should. You look at the main countries in the world today, the common denominator is they all have a demographic crisis of not enough people. Europe has a demographic crisis. There's no reproduction going on. In other words, the populations are falling. Japan is perhaps even more extreme, that the population is aging. China, because of the crazy one child per family policy, which they got from some crackpot environmentalists here in the United States, they've got a terrible situation. Russia, similarly. So you look around, all the big countries have a problem of demographics, not enough people. The opposite of the population bomb or any of that stuff. There is no overpopulation. There's underpopulation. Now, the United States, happy are we that people around the world still want to come here. If you ask me what do I think is the main strategic advantage of the United States in today's world, it's that people want to come here. We are the classic immigration country, right? As they say in Europe, das klassische Einwanderungsland is us. People want to come here. They want to work. Look, the problem of assimilation is simply a problem of the labor market. All you need is readily available jobs, and people will assimilate fast, right? I believe in the melting pot. I think that everybody brings what they have to give, and then the outcome of that is a change of the melting pot, to be sure, but it's constantly producing a new national spirit or other factors. This is our tremendous advantage. I would not interfere with this in a million years, because it's also the case that at least as a tendency, we know how to solve these problems. You go to some place like France, they do not know. They've been laughing at the racist U.S. for all these years, but it turns out then when you have the Algerians in the banlieue, they don't know what to do. So I regard immigrants as human capital to be educated, to be developed. You've got to invest in that. That's your future. If we didn't have them, we'd be looking at a demographic collapse on the scale of some other country. Now, in the United States, is there really an ethno-cultural identity? I mean, look around this room. There is no such thing, right? There is a melting pot. But there's nothing that says, you have to be from this place or that place or anything else. I don't see that at all. You want to take the opposite one. I think probably the most different is perhaps someplace like Japan. This is just my guess, that in Japan the ethnic and cultural uniformity is pronounced, right? So we're at the opposite end of that. But I think, and New York City especially, right? New York City is essentially a machine for assimilating generation after generation of immigrants, right? The layers of ethnicity from Polish, Irish, Italian to Far East or whatever else you have, Russian, all different ones. I think that's a tremendous strength. I think that the hybrids are stronger, and the U.S. should regard this as a tremendous advantage. Therefore, I think that these people, when they make I know, they're crazy because they know nothing of economics. All they know is their idiotic story. And again, I'm happy to reach out to them on issues. But in terms of that mindset that they hate foreigners, and xenophobia is a suicidal impulse in today's world. Trump is strongly saying that you've got foreigners who are taking the benefits that your children should be taking. Yeah, I am not in favor of the existing distribution. It's unjust, right? It was established by Reagan. It's redistribution from the lower and middle to the top 1%. This has to be stopped. But still, no matter what you do to have an economy, you're going to need large numbers of immigrants. So why not legalize it? Why not make this essentially the opposite of what Trump wants, instead of it's not a wall at all, but a process of rather easy immigration? I think that would be the future.